Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
And we're back with...
Nope. We're not back.
We're not
it's
back.
a new episode.
Oh, and we're back with a new episode. I was going to say, and we're back with a new episode. Okay, hey everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Hey everyone. I'm Greg Srzavasti.
Matt Levitz,
And we are Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars.
I guess. Sure.
You guess? Sure. Let's be more sure. This is going to be a very big episode. Saving Private Ryan, considered one of Steven Spielberg's best films.
By many people.
By many, many people.
It is a great one. This junket took place on June 28th, 1998. And let me tell you who's going to be on this show. It's pretty much everyone. This is a supersized episode. We have Tom Sizemore, Edward Burns, Barry Pepper, Vin Diesel, Adam Goldberg, Jeremy Davies, Matt Damon, Tom Hanks, director Steven Spielberg, and Rex Harrison as Abraham Lincoln.
Very cool. That very funny. You were thinking if I was listening to you, and I do listen, Rex Harrison.
That was actually a reference to Police Squad, but I'm sure you caught that.
I did not. I'm
sure everyone else caught it but you.
But me, yes.
Okay. So we do have a lot of interviews, and therefore we're going to skip junket talk, but I do want to say a couple of things about Saving Private Ryan. Now, back in the junket days, we never saw trailers. The screenings didn't have them. The lights would go down and the movie would start. And this was the only way we saw movies, like 6 times a week, so trailers weren't even on our radar. And then we saw them about a month before the movies opened nationwide in theaters, so that was before the TV commercials started airing, so we didn't see those either. So we would see these movies with almost a completely blank slate. We almost had no idea at all what they were going to look like. And I say almost because we did have one thing. We had talked to the actors who were in these movies at earlier junkets, and we always asked, what's the next thing we're going to see you in? What's it about? Who do you play? So we had that verbal knowledge in our head because they would tell us about the things. And so we would sit down for a movie like Saving Private Ryan, and we would think, okay, so this is that World War II movie that Tom Hanks told us about 6 months ago. And that was it. That was all we knew. And to be honest, I kind of miss that. I miss going to a movie and not knowing anything about it. If you guys can ever manage that, it's a great experience. I recommend it. But anyway, none of us were prepared for that first half hour of Saving Private Ryan. I mean, no one had warned us. I remember feeling completely shell-shocked. How about you, Greg? Did you have kind of that same experience?
Yeah, I remember being shell-shocked during the screening. I also remember thinking that this is probably the most gripping Steven Spielberg directed film I'd ever seen at that moment, maybe rivaling even Schindler's List at that moment. That was my first visceral reaction to those opening moments of Saving Private Ryan.
I really liked the movie. It does give you a feel for what World War II must have been like. I mean, probably better than any other movie, which is a great accomplishment for Steven Spielberg. But having said all of that, I do have one narrative problem with it that's always bothered me.
The ending?
No, I think it was good that we won the war. I don't think they should have changed that.
Okay.
If you remember, Greg, the movie starts and ends with Matt Damon as an old man visiting the gravesite of Captain Miller, Tom Hanks' character, and you see how emotional he is. And then at the very beginning of the film, we zoom close into his eyes as he remembers the story, and then we dissolve to the rest of the movie knowing that this is his flashback. So we're watching his memories. But here's the thing. For 3/4 of the movie, Matt Damon's character isn't in it. He shows up literally at the 1 hour and 46-minute mark. Up until then, the movie is about the men who are going out looking for him. You know, Private Ryan wasn't on the beaches of Normandy. He wasn't with that unit when they got the orders to go find him. He didn't go out with them to go look for himself. He wasn't a part of any of these things that we watch for 1 hour and 46 minutes of screen time. So how is it possible that we're watching his memories? He wasn't there, so he can't remember those things. I mean, especially in such pristine detail, what everyone did and said. For the movie to make any sense, the old guy at the gravesite at the beginning and at the end should not have been Ryan. It really should have been anyone but him. So that's always kind of bothered me. But other than that, I think it's a brilliant film.
I'm thinking about that. That is a good point. Should have been one of... Yeah.
Yeah, anyone but Matt Damon.
Yeah. So we have a huge, pretty much just a laundry list. It's going to be a long episode.
It is. Before we get to it, I've got a little bit of background info that I want to give. In order to accurately portray soldiers and also for the actors to bond as a unit, the cast of this film was required to go through an Army boot camp program where they were properly trained to be soldiers. And I'm not going to go into the details of that because you're going to hear all of them talk about it, mostly because I kept asking them to. That was kind of my one question I kept asking.
You asked them, what was your favorite Beatles song while you were in boot camp?
What was your favorite Beatles song during World War II? I will tell you that their drill sergeant was a man named Dale Dye, who is a retired captain of the U.S. Marine Corps. Dye has dedicated himself to helping Hollywood get military protocol right. Since 1986, he's served as technical advisor on such films as Platoon, Casualties of War, Born on the 4th of July, JFK, The Last of the Mohicans, Forrest Gump, Starship Troopers, The Thin Red Line, Rules of Engagement, Tropic Thunder, and the HBO series Band of Brothers. And he also played small roles in most of those films. And if you watch the TNT show Falling Skies, you'd probably recognize him from his role as Jim Porter. His work on Saving Private Ryan was instrumental, and you're going to hear today a lot about Captain Dale Dye and the basic training that he put these actors through, and then the presence that he maintained on the set throughout filming. So now when you hear him talked about, you'll know who he is.
Well, our first person interviewed is Tom Sizemore.
Yeah, we've got Tom Sizemore as Sergeant Chris Horvath. Actually, I don't know that his first name is Chris. It's just Sergeant Horvath in the credits, but I do think that Tom Sizemore looks like a Chris Horvath, so I'm going to go with that. Yeah, I've done enough talking. Why don't you tell us about Tom Sizemore, Greg?
Well, the thing is, at this moment of time, you know, this is considered one of Sizemore's most notable films. But if you look at his credits leading up to that, it's just a laundry list of just really cool films and really good characterizations, character work. Passenger 57 in 1992. Heart and Souls with Robert Downey Jr. 93. True Romance. I mean, who could forget his? I mean, there's so many memorable moments. He's really good with Chris Penn in True Romance. There's that movie Striking Distance in 93, the same year of True Romance, which was a Bruce Willis film that absolutely bombed, but it was still a very.
Don't remember that one.
Yeah, though it was still a very interesting movie, and but basically he's a character actor. I remember at the time I interviewed him a lot, and he was really excited. This is even pre-Sergeant Private Ryan. This goes back to around the film, the 1997 film, actually, The Relic, which was released a year prior to Saving Private Ryan. At that interview, he was really interested in becoming a leading man. So he amassed, bottom line, a Devil in a Blue Dress in 95. He's also great in Strange Days. Natural Born Killers. There's so many great interesting movies that Sizemore was a part of in 98. And at the moment of that interview, we were just thinking that no matter what, I mean, I even forgot to even mention Heat. What a career up to Private Ryan. My personal assumption after that interview was he would continue to do just years and years of just A-level work in A-list movies.
Yeah, it didn't work out that way, did it?
No, but right now it does work out that way because we're going to listen to an interview with Tom Sizemore. Do you have anything to say before we get into the interview?
No, just that, we're going back in time to June 28th, 1998, when Tom Sizemore was still on top of the world.
Here's Tom Sizemore.
Same guys.
Over and over.
Same questions. It just means we're working. That's great. You guys have maintained your positions. Nice to see y'all.
Same here. What about the hyper-realism of this film? I mean, how much did you know about the invasion of Normandy prior to this, and how did you get into the character?
I didn't, when I was first cast by Stephen, I didn't know much about Normandy except that we won. I didn't know, for instance, that the first 5,000 men were killed, were slaughtered, and 18 of them, only 18 survived and made to the seawall. And Tom and I played 2 of those 18, and the entire mission was what they call FUBAR. You know what that means, right? Fucked up beyond all recognition. And they decoded us. They knew we were coming. They mined the beach. They got our planes in dogfights. We had no plane cover fire. They got our big boats into conflicts with their big boats. We had no big boat fire. I shouldn't say we. I don't mean to include myself in those heroes that died on that beach. But, and Tom at one point does say to me, he goes, "Where in the hell is everybody? And where is everything?" And I say, "We're right where we're supposed to be, but nothing else is, nobody else is." Remember that? When we're on the seawall? That's where we're underneath the pillbox. And the whole objective was to get to the seawall. And I went to Omaha Beach, and you'd be shocked at how closely it resembled the beach we shot the movie on. But and all the crosses are just brings you right to your knees. You just start weeping. And I did not know that 90% of the kids were 19, and that of that 90% of those 19-year-olds, none had seen any battle. And the only ones that had seen battle were us officers, like Hanks and myself, the captains and the sergeants. And I did not know that it was that, according to Stephen, and I've heard and read in several places that it's in fact true, that Eisenhower was writing a letter of concession saying we'd been driven back into the ocean. And they were already devising a plan to go around and come in through, what's the bottom island of Italy? Sicily? Yeah, that was the plan B. That letter was destroyed because, in fact, we took the beach. But it was a 3-day battle, and I don't think people know what that means. It means that for 3 days, we didn't know what was going to happen. It could have gone either way. But particularly the beginning, they almost got us. They almost just jumped us and beat us back into the right from the jump. Because for the men behind these first few boats that went in, 5,000 men going down, you can imagine coming up on it and seeing that carnage, and yet getting out of your boat. And mainly, most of the boats didn't make the beach. You had to jump out of your boat into the freezing sea and let go of half your gear and try and keep your gun dry. And, excuse me, there's no such thing as a gun. You're only allowed to say weapon and rifle. This is my whip, and this is my gun. This is for shoot, and this is for fun. We did that in boot camp. So you're not allowed to say gun. If you said gun, you'd do push-ups all day. Captain Dye is a sweetheart. But I didn't know any of those things about D-Day, that it was such a cluster F, a complete disaster, and that it was the ingenuity of the common GI and the common Marine that carried the day, in fact.
How about boot camp? Tell us about the experience.
No, he was going to ask a question.
All right.
I was going to say that this role seemed like it was made just for you. What was the most important scene for you in this role?
Well, I'm glad you say that. This role seemed like it was made for me because he's a very different character for me, and he's got a white hat on, which is very important to me now. That I play good men, not bad men. I've done that, and I feel I've done a okay job at it successfully, and I'm ready to play heroic people. And Stephen gave me the opportunity, and I made the part my own. I did see a lot of. I must admit, I wanted to play this part for a year before it was cast. I read the script a long time ago and was targeting it in my head. There was a lot of things that were common, but I found common with Horvath and me. In point of fact, I am a quiet person and low-key, taciturn type individual in life. I can be extrovertish when I'm really, really comfortable and with people I know. In these situations, you have to, kind of be extrovertish to because I want to give you guys, good stuff and promote the movie and sound like I know what I'm talking about. But and Horvath's quietness, and yet his ability, his moodiness, in that he was able to, like he does with Reiben, like bam, when it came time to pounce. Now he pounces on Ed Burns, and does not follow the protocol. I tell him, the captain tells him to gear up, and he says no. And I go, come on, Reiben, gear up and fall in. He says no. And I push him down. He pops up, and then he gives me a look, and I don't even flinch. I just said, gear, whatever the line was, gear up, fall in, whatever. And then whatever. That, I have that kind of explosiveness in me, but that is very rare. And the sergeant is a very controlled individual. He has to be. And I like to think of myself that way. And actually, Sergeant Michael Horvath taught me a lot about myself. And if I could be that courageous under fire, I'd like to think that I would perform with that much courage and that much dignity if I were under fire. But no one knows how they would be until they heard an angry shot. And I love the relationship the captain and the sergeant have. The relationship I have with Tom Hanks. When we're alone, the protocol's dropped. He calls me Mike. I call him John. When we talk in the church, that's one of my favorite scenes, and the scene on the bridge, which I can't really reveal anything that happens on the bridge. But and even at the end, he goes, Mike, 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 and you see that bond between the two of them. And the movie doesn't mask it, and I think I can reveal this, that Tom is falling apart. His tank's almost empty, and I know that. We've been together 4 years. You see, when I felt those canisters, Italy, Africa, and then that one says France, we've been there together. That's what's supposed to, and also it's supposed to communicate that, plus that I've been there. Of course I've been there, but with him. And I'm taking these home as keepsakes. And also that the sergeant really expects to live. I thought those canisters were very symbolic in a way, that he expects to take these out on the other end and show them to people. And I was in these places, and I helped fight to keep this country free. But the relationship with Tom, the way he kept his eye on him, and tried to make sure, I'm going to get this guy, we're going to get out of this, and we're going to, no matter what, I'm getting you out of this. You're going home alive. And I just really loved the guy.
Do you consider this movie a sort of rousing nationalistic movie about brave individuals fighting to keep this country free, or as a potent anti-war movie?
What's great about the movie, I think, is I think it could be interpreted both ways. And I would ask the filmmaker what his intent was. I think, for myself, the movie asked the question, at what cost? I don't think it's an anti-war film. I think we have to be realistic and know that, unfortunately, seems to be an instinct, however abhorrent, of mankind to fight one another, to fight over things, and you morally have to kind of delineate now what's worth fighting for if you're going to fight. And we live in a society that does fight itself. Last night there were probably, in this country, I don't know, 700 murders. People kill each other. And actually, in this one book I read on World War II, it said there's never been the author said there had never been a day in recorded history that there hasn't been a war somewhere at some time, somewhere all the time. There's always been some kind of conflict somewhere. So I think the movie asks the question, at what cost are we willing to, using Ryan symbolically as one man and then the 8 men, are they expendable for this one man, this mission? And that's the question it posits, to you, the film goer. And I don't think there's a pat answer to that. At what cost do you, where do you draw the line? What are you willing to lose? I mean, the fight at Normandy really came down to a war of attrition. We had more guys to die. We had more guys than they had. So.
Can I ask you, since you had read the initial script way early, how different, what are we seeing up there that's like so different from the initial?
Oh, I'd say the overall impact is basically the same. There's some different things. The conflict between Reiben and I was not in the original script. I actually wrote a brief kind of lecture monologue that I gave to Eddie, and I showed to Steve. I said, I think Sarge really has to let this guy know what he thinks of him. And early on, and wouldn't it be great that by the end of the movie, we never explain why, but they're back to they're buddies, not like great buddies, but you see the three of us sitting around there talking. He's listening to Edith Piaf, Optimiz, and you see me listening to Reiben tell his story, and you don't for 1 minute question, I thought they were in. I mean, that's what happens in war. You have these conflicts that build up. And Stephen took that piece of paper, gave it to Frank Darabont, bam, next day we had a scene. We didn't shoot it for a while, but that scene was added to what was initially a very, they just touched on it. Mr. Rodat did. I would say that the dialogue changed, 20% maybe, 15, and that's pretty good actually when you think of, maybe more, I don't know. But Stephen was always looking for that great accident, and because he's so well prepared, when I say accident, I mean when people drop a line or don't know what they're doing exactly and have to search for it and they find it, and it makes the scene tonally, the tone of the scene different and stuff. He because he's so prepared, he can take advantage of those accidents, because sometimes those accidents are beautiful, and you know what I mean. And they're spontaneous, they're new, they're fresh, they're brand, they're right there. There's a real lifeness to them, and that can only happen though if you're prepared, and you really do know it. Just as a kind of a fluke that you know what I mean. I think. I hope you know what I mean.
You've seen the movie.
Yeah.
And your reaction.
I saw the movie 6 weeks ago. I can't give you an objective reaction because I'm in it, but I thought it was I don't like watching myself generally, which is I'm trying to get better at, because my wife tells me that I'm missing out, that I'm pretty good. I mean, that sounds silly and pretentious, but I am trying to enjoy watching myself more, because all I see when I watch myself and is the mistakes, and I could have been better there, I could have done this, I could have done that, and that's the truth, and I'm not making that up. But this movie, I was able, for whatever reason, to really kind of get over myself, my selfish interests in my performance, and watch the movie. And I worked every day on this movie, 61 days. I knew everything that happened, and I wept when it was over.
Do you feel for the audience at all? I mean, I was getting a little sick last night in points of the movie, and I can imagine what just an average moviegoer would be doing, because I know this is all, I'm a jaded film critic, but what do you feel for the audience, I mean, at all that's going to have to be roughed up a little bit by Spielberg and you guys?
Do I feel for them?
Yeah, what do you think, what would you tell them about this movie?
I tell them to be careful about they shouldn't take their children. I think it's a movie for, we got an R, right? So what does that mean?
Means
Children under 16 only with a parent.
I think that's fair. And to really, before I went and took a 16-year-old, I would go see it, and then think about my 16-year-old and his maturity level, and could he handle something like this? So I think there's some great things in this movie, even though it is a tough movie, and like you say, it's tough on an audience. but so was Schindler's List, and so was The Deer Hunter. So were a lot of great movies. I like movies like that are kind of rough you up a bit. Myself, I don't like pat, super pat movies. Where there's no surprises and you just 1, 2, 3, bang. 1, 2, 3, bang. This movie, I think, is a very different movie than anything out there now, and is a different type of movie than you would expect from Steven. But you do have to remember he did make Schindler's List, which wasn't a walk in the park. I found that movie to be, it roughed me up. Didn't it rough you up? Yeah. So he's done it before, and I think the audience, you guys were there. How did you feel?
It was informative. It was emotional.
Yeah.
Gutsy.
I think that's what they'll walk away with. I hope so. All right.
Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, you guys.
And we're back with the interview with Tom Sizemore. Matt, you have a couple of things to say about Mr. Sizemore?
I just have one. I got a bone to pick here.
What?
All right. Not with you.
No. Okay.
Not with you. Did you notice I tried to ask a question and Tom Sizemore cut me off, pointed to Ron Brewington and said he was going to ask a question. So I backed off and Ron asked his question and he got his answer. And then somebody else asked the next question, cutting me off, and I never got mine in. So I just want to point out that Tom Sizemore did not cut the next person off and say, hey, that was Matt's turn, he was next, the way that he did for Ron. I mean, this was 20 years ago and I am over it.
But are you, Matt?
There's been some therapy. I'm just saying, that wasn't cool.
Wow. But what wasn't cool too is we're not going to get into just the Sizemore's troubles with drug addiction or the law. The bottom line is 20 years since Saving Private Ryan, his career, though not reaching the levels of his earlier stuff, he has. I mean, if you look at his list, every year he continues to act in movies. So at least his career as an actor, it's still moving on. Who knows?
So he's still out there.
He's still out there. There's just a lot of movies. The only problem is most of these movies are streaming, video on demand. Not too many. It's not going to reach a huge audience. Maybe this time around, if we do get Tom Sizemore once again, he will finally be able to answer a question from Matt Levitz.
I'm sure that's his goal in life.
Well, that's my goal in life. Should be your goal as well.
Greg, is that your goal in life?
Yes.
Okay, you just answered a question.
I'm sorry? Yes, I did. Here's another thing I'm excited about this interview that I really remembered from this interview was how at that moment I was also into the career of Edward Burns because, as you know, the late 80s, early 90s, early to mid 90s, there was a huge renaissance or just not resurgence, but indie films were such an important part of the cinema marketplace, and Edward Burns was one of the leaders thanks to the brothers McMullen.
Right, yeah, writing, directing, and starring in his own movies. He was an auteur at the time, which I guess he still does. Maybe not as much as he did at the beginning, but...
Yeah, he still does. And, several years ago, he had his... Well, we'll do that in the postscript stuff. But at this moment, this is a huge movie for him. I was a fan of his work as an indie film lover, but this is a whole different scale. This was his first movie where this is Edward Burns as part of a huge ensemble.
Right, and he's only acting in it.
Yes, he's only acting in it.
He's showing up in a Steven Spielberg film, which is huge for any actor.
Yeah, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but in the interview, he, like Matt said, he talks about the boot camp experience with Die, and he also discusses his experiences of going back to Normandy after the film wrapped, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of really cool Edward Burns stuff in the interview. Matt, do you have anything to say before we get into the interview and then the postscript?
I have nothing at all to say.
You have nothing to say. That it's very rare.
No, I have things in my head, but I'm a polite guy. I'm not going to say them.
They're percolating. Let's see what percolates after this Edward Burns interview.
What's going on here, huh?
In the house.
How we feeling?
We're radio, so scoot on in.
How you doing?
All right.
I know you, don't I?
Yeah, I've talked to you in Atlanta.
All right.
We're radio, so scoot on
Oh, yeah. You need me tighter?
Yep.
All right. So,
I'll ask you the same question I've asked a couple other people, and that is what was your knowledge of Normandy and the invasion and that aspect of World War II prior to this?
not much more than you learned in a high school social studies class. Although my mom was addicted to that show, The World at War. You remember that program that used to be on? So I used to watch that with her a lot. So I think I had, but I was young, so I had a little sense of what D-Day meant. But when I got Stephen Ambrose's book, I learned how little I really know.
So was making this film the experience to end all experiences?
It's strange to be, sort of at the start of your career, really, and know that nothing will ever duplicate this. For a number of different reasons. You get to work with someone like Stephen, who has, with the whole cast, but especially a bunch of us are young filmmakers, was so giving, and we learned so much, and he wanted us to learn so much. Then you work with somebody like Tom Hanks, who, aside from learning a lot from him as an actor, there isn't a more professional guy in Hollywood. So as a young actor, you get to say, oh, you know what? I don't have to be a jerk. You tend to think, like, for whatever reasons, I'm sure you guys have met all those jerks that I'm talking about, but Hanks is just so professional. He's kind to everybody, from the catering people to, whomever. So you've got that. Then you're a part of a film that is, has historical significance, is important, powerful, and you're a part of that. For all these different reasons, I can't imagine I'll be a part of a film that satisfies on all those levels.
What did you learn specifically from Steve?
I've joked around and said the one thing I learned is how little I really know about filmmaking, but it's true. Every day, I would just sort of stand over his shoulder and try and absorb as much as I can. And it's everything from just watching him work with Janusz and what he knows about the camera and the lenses just blew me away. I came at filmmaking from a very different place as a writer, and really am just starting to learn how to use cinema, if you will. Stephen obviously knows the camera, what camera movement means. For me, even seeing the film, looking at the editing, looking at, I kept a close eye on the coverage to see, what camera angles he shot and then what he ended up using. Also looking at what scenes ended up on the cutting room floor. I've always said, for any writer, the most valuable education you can get is get in an editing room on day one while a film is being cut and watch it through, because that's the final rewrite and the most important one. So watching this film, I was curious to see what Stephen decided to leave out. And again, you see, all right, obviously, okay, that scene I thought was important, I realized we didn't need it, and here's why. The way he communicates with his crew, the way he communicates with the actors. And the thing about filmmaking or trying to learn how to be a director is the film school doesn't really teach you that. So directors have to sort of learn it out in the field. For me, the fact that I am now going to do some acting, I kind of get to go and watch other guys and see what their styles are and sort of pull what I like best about their individual styles.
Stephen has a great way of tapping people for roles, and whether he saw someone in a small film or this or that. Can you talk about how you were tapped and what was it like from your perspective getting?
Yeah. Apparently he had seen, I didn't know, but he had seen McMullen and thought I would be right for this part. But I had gotten the script from my agent at the time. Stephen, we knew Stephen was directing and Hanks was going to play Miller. And they said, just, let's see if there's anything in there, that you like. I'm like, I'm just keep my fingers crossed if there's any part that, that I see. And I read the part of Reiben, I think, all right, wise-ass New Yorker, could maybe handle that. Know a little something about that. So I called my agent and said, let's go for this part. And he says, I don't know, it's a pretty big part. I don't know if it can happen, but I'll call. So call up DreamWorks and say, hey, Eddie Burns is interested in playing Reiben. About 2 weeks later, 2 days before Christmas, they call and say, you got it. And that was it. So it was one of, the greatest Christmas I've ever had. And I didn't meet Steven until the day before we started shooting. So.
Is it a freeing experience, just acting?
It was completely liberating because, I could show up on the set and not have to worry about everything that Steven's worrying about. I don't have to worry about where the camera's going. Are we happy with the lighting? Are we happy with the script? Why isn't that Steadicam working? I could just go and concentrate on my work. And what it did was it freed me up to try some things that I know I wouldn't try or have tried in my own film. Also, when you're working with Steven and Tom, you know that you're in such safe hands that you're maybe more willing to take a chance or to dive into an emotion that maybe you wouldn't otherwise. And they're there to say, okay, good, maybe take it back a little, or you can go further. And Steven pushed me. I mean, there are a couple of scenes, scene where I get up in Hanks' face and the scene where Tom dies in the end. I'd probably have to. So, but those were two tough scenes for me as an actor, and I was nervous about them because I'd never done anything like that. And fortunately, one scene I went to Tom for the help, and the other scene I went to Steven and Matt. So, it was probably because of boot camp. We'd gone through so much together. We knew one another so well. Everybody's guard was down. There was a lot of give and take. Everybody was willing to share. Nobody was afraid to sort of look stupid or potentially screw up,
Can you talk about the boot camp experience?
Yeah, I've said it was the toughest thing I've ever done in my life, and I hated every second of it. But the minute it was over, I was so happy I was there, and I've never felt such a sense of accomplishment. It's funny. When I saw the film, when the film was over, the first guy I wanted to thank was Captain Dye, our military advisor, because there were moments in boot camp where we all wanted to quit, and Captain Dye kind of sat us down and gave us a talk, and he said, look, you guys represent my fraternity, the fraternity of soldiers, but you're also going to represent all the men that have died for this country and the guys that died on the beach that day, and I'm not going to allow you to disgrace their honor. You're going to take this soldiering seriously, because I don't want one vet to see this film and say, that's a half-assed actor. And that slapped everybody in the face, and as much as it was tough, and even during the shooting, Captain Dye was in your face every day. If you weren't, jamming that magazine in there and doing it like your life was on the line, or walking properly in formation or at the ready, if you got lazy, he's in your face screaming and yelling. And again, you hated him. I mean, you didn't, he was tough on you. The minute the film was over, he's the first guy you hugged and said, thanks for being there. So.
During World War II, there were actors, famous actors who signed up in a New York Minute to go to war, and I'm wondering how you would feel if put in that same kind of situation. You got a great career going, you don't have to sign up. Obviously World War II I think was a different deal than some of the wars that followed, but I kind of come from a world where that's what you do. My dad was in the service. I would go. That's how I was brought up. Did you feel for these guys at all? I mean, being now you've sort of walked in their shoes. I mean, you've been through this boot camp experience, the filming.
I guess closer than other people have walked in the shoes. But doing a movie, there's no way for you to know the horror that these guys experienced. You can try and get as close as you can in some of those scenes, but there's no way to know what that's like. But maybe you get some sense. When we wrapped, I went down to Normandy to the American Cemetery, and I just kind of walked around on the beach and through the bunkers and went up to the cemetery, and was just sort of, obviously I was shocked by how many graves there were, and I obviously I knew the number of people that were killed there, but I wasn't having, I wasn't getting upset or anything like that. But then I went there's a chapel in the center of the cemetery, and I walked in, and the minute I crossed into it, I got a chill down my back and just started gushing. Not like crying, sobbing, just eyes watering, couldn't breathe, so I had to sit down. And then I said a prayer, went outside and tried to explain to my friend who I was with what just happened in there, and that's when I just started losing it. And there's nothing that I thought of. It's not like I walked in there and said, oh, wow, it could have been me, or hey, it could have been my buddies. I think just seeing all those graves of guys who were 8 or 10 years younger than me and thought, and I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe it was different time, different place. That's me and my buddies. And maybe the fact that I just done the film kind of is what, triggered that reaction. But I don't really know.
What was the most important scene for you?
For me as an actor, the toughest scene, maybe the Hanks at the end or the mutiny scene, but not so much what my character does in the mutiny. When Hanks reveals to us who his character really is, I think that's when everyone in the film sees, this isn't, these guys, as much as they were heroic, they're not what we've traditionally seen as these heroes. Hanks isn't Sergeant Rock running up the hill saving the day. He's a school teacher. He's a regular guy. And we were all just, those guys there were all just regular guys who unfortunately had to, go into this horrible war and see all these horrors. So for me, that's the scene where the movie kind of hits me that, man, we're lucky that they were there and that I didn't have to be. So,
do you have another script ready to go?
I did a deal with DreamWorks, so I'm doing my next film with them, and it's tentatively called The 2-5. It's about which is a nickname for the 25th precinct in New York. My dad worked there. My cousin Andy works there now, so it's sort of a story about Irish American cops in New York City.
How about the research you're going to do for that role?
Oh, well, my whole life has been research. I grew up in a big cop family, and playing cop golf tournaments and done ride-alongs with my cousin Andy. Every wedding I've been to, the Emerald Society, pipe band is there, and it's nothing but cops. So it's as much as the research I have to do is more the procedural stuff. But a big part of the film is what it's like to come from that type of family where when your dad goes off to work, there's a possibility he's not coming back. So that's kind of what it's about.
So once again, you'll have a role where somebody's going to look at you, like you said, veterans look at this picture.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Well, my dad, read the first draft about a month ago. And, he's going through it with me. Bullshit. So I said, okay. So he gave me about 50 pages of notes, but he just got the last draft, and he said, all right, now we're getting someplace. So I'm not going to do it for a year because I'm sure it's going to take a while before we get this thing right.
Well, how important is it that the details be right? Because a lot of directors would just say, well, go for the drama, and maybe if we, If
I was making a film like Dirty Harry, which I love, then you can sort of excuse some of that stuff. But if I'm trying to make a film that says, hey, this is not only what cops go through, but also trying to say something about, generations of Irish Americans who have been policemen, especially in New York, I would catch way too much crap if it wasn't legit. So.
Are you going to do acting, just acting?
Yeah, I'm not going to make this film until the next fall.
What is your next film?
So there's 2 that start in September, and I was supposed to do one, then something came up on Friday. So now it's decision time. So probably by next Friday, I will have made a decision.
Heads is this, tails.
Yeah, sort of, So we got to see. It's sort of, it's weird to be in that position, quite honestly, Who would have thunk it?
Are you going to kind of venture out from your own personal experience, though, when you're making your own films here?
As a filmmaker?
Yeah.
I have a Western that I kind of wrote. Kind of wrote in that it's not finished. And that's sort of the first one where I'm excited to do something one day where I don't have to worry about, being honest, if you will,
When you act and direct at the same time, how do you achieve that balance?
I have no idea, quite honestly. I just, wing it. So sometimes it works. Sometimes they release it on 3 screens.
This one certainly won't be on 3 screens.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
Okay, so we're back from Edward Burns. You have a couple things to say about Mr. Burns.
I do. He talked about his next film, which was tentatively called The 2-5, about Irish-American cops in New York City. He never did make this movie. I have no idea why or what happened. I looked through his filmography to see if maybe it came out under a different name, but the closest I could find was a television series he did for TNT in 2015 called Public Morals, which was about cops, but they were in New York in the 1960s, so I don't think it's the same thing.
Right, the TV series, short-lived, one season. Maybe it was a standalone season, right? Maybe.
I'm not sure, but it was the only other thing he's ever done about cops, so I thought maybe that was, he had taken that script and turned it into it, but I don't think so. I think it's too different. So I guess The 2-5 has never been made.
And it's hard to actually star in a movie on the level of a Steven Spielberg film, Saving Private Ryan. So I'm going to say this with a caveat. He hasn't done a film on that level since, but he's been in feature films, not just as a director, but films that he's acted in include 2012's Alex Cross. He was in Man on a Ledge as a cop. I mean, he plays a lot of cops. And he was in the rom-com 27 Dresses. He was in the thriller, which was a hit, 2008, called One Missed Call. So he was in The Holiday. Everyone loves that Christmas movie with Kate Winslet and Cameron Diaz as a love interest. So he was in this movie with Ben Kingsley in 2005 called The River King. So he's had his share of acting moments. But I think a part of his thing is he's continued, like you were saying, Matt, he's continued to make indie films. So he's balanced an indie film career in New York as well as an acting career. So overall, he's steadily acted, but he could probably act a lot more if he wasn't a director. So that's a good thing. He's a guy who's actually balanced his career after Saving Private Ryan pretty well with a lot of credits.
That is true. Now, during the interview, he said that he was weighing his next acting job, and he was trying to decide between two different projects. We actually didn't see him again on the screen until 3 years later. So I guess those two projects didn't pan out. His next appearance was in the Robert De Niro film 15 Minutes in March of 2001. So I guess he took a little break. Maybe he was writing.
Maybe he was writing and working on his next project as a director. But our next interview is really cool too, because we have two actors in the, I guess, nascent part of their career, would you say?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we're talking about Barry Pepper and Vin Diesel. And right now, probably quite a few of you are saying to yourselves, wait, Vin Diesel was in Saving Private Ryan? Yes, he was. It was actually his very first movie, and he was completely unknown at the time. He played Private Carpazzo, and he isn't in very much of it because he gets shot at the 52-minute mark. You might remember the scene. The unit has a firefight while Vin Diesel is dying in the middle of the road, and they can't get to him because the bullets are flying. Now, Vin Diesel actually owes his career to Steven Spielberg. And he's going to tell this story, so I don't want to spoil it too much, but he leaves a lot of detail out, so I want to fill that in. In 1995, Diesel, then a struggling, unknown actor, made a short 20-minute film called Multifacial, where he plays a struggling actor. And by the way, you can find Multifacial on YouTube and watch it for free. Diesel didn't just act in this short film. He also wrote it, directed it, produced it, and he wrote and performed the score, which is interesting because he doesn't do any of those things since becoming an A-list actor. He's just an actor now. But in the beginning, when he was struggling and trying to break through, he did that. He wrote and directed a short film. And I'm going to read you an Instagram post that Vin wrote and published on December 6th, 2016, so not too long ago. So this is a direct quote. I started acting when I was 7 years old and started bouncing in NYC when I was 17 to pay the bills. Failed the first time I came to Hollywood at 23, and then went back to NY to learn how to be a filmmaker because no one was giving me an opportunity to make it. I directed a short film called Multifacial about a struggling multicultural actor trying to work in New York. I then came back to LA with my short film at 27 years old. At that time, I would drive around with VHS copies of my short film in the trunk just in case I bumped into someone who could help me with my dreams. One day I was driving by the Four Seasons Hotel when I saw one of my favorite actors walking into the hotel, Morgan Freeman. He was seriously one of my acting role models. I mean, I remembered him from a show called Electric Company and always followed his career. This was my big chance. Maybe I could, after 20 years, finally get noticed. So I pulled over, popped the trunk, and ran after him to give him my short film. So that's the end of the quote. What happened next was Steven Spielberg wound up seeing the short film, and he was so impressed with Vin Diesel that he wound up creating the part of Private Carpazzo just so that he could cast Vin in the movie. And that was the start of Diesel's whole Hollywood career. But I think there's a little piece of this story that everyone has missed. No one ever talks about how Steven Spielberg wound up seeing Multifacial. It's just kind of assumed that, he's Steven Spielberg, he sees everything, he knows everyone, so of course every struggling actor is automatically on his radar. But I don't think so. I think there's a connection here. Greg, do you remember what the movie was that Spielberg made 1 year before he made Saving Private Ryan?
Amistad?
Amistad. Yes, 1997, starring Morgan Freeman.
Oh.
So my guess is Morgan Freeman probably handed Spielberg that VHS tape that he got from the Four Seasons. It's pure speculation on my part, but the pieces fit.
Oh, it totally fits. Totally. And regarding Amistad, to your point, Matt, there is a little bit of conversation about being on set with Amistad that Barry Pepper and Vin Diesel discuss in the interview. Yeah, not to give too much away, but Barry Pepper at the time was also a pretty novice actor. He's gone on to, both actors had memorable parts in Saving Private Ryan, but Pepper has also gone on to have a great career. We'll talk about that in the postscript. But I will say this before we get into Saving Private Ryan. One of my worst experiences of watching a movie starred Barry Pepper, Battlefield Earth. I don't remember if you and
L. Ron Hubbard.
That was just a miserable experience. I don't want to bring the listenership down, but I just wanted to say, if you ever have the chance to see Battlefield Earth, Barry Pepper in it, do not see that.
John Travolta.
And John Travolta, do not see this movie. I know Multifacial, Matt, is on YouTube. If Battlefield Earth is on YouTube, please skip it. I really enjoy this Barry Pepper and Vin Diesel interview as well, because they really continue. Dale Dye is a big part of this press junket, so they also expand on their experiences.
Right, he wasn't there, but everyone talks about him.
Yeah, everyone talks about him. So
again, Vin Diesel was a complete unknown, so it's kind of fun hearing him so young and green, and not yet Groot.
Yes, not yet Groot. And here we are with the interview of Barry Pepper and Vin Diesel.
What's up, guys? This is radio, if you guys can come right up to that.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, perfect. Good.
Can you say one more time so when we listen back, we just got to put the name of the voice.
Do the what?
Introduce yourselves so we know who's talking.
Oh, I am Barry Pepper. I play Private Roy Jackson, C Company, 2nd Rangers.
Hi, I'm Vin Diesel. I play Private First Class Caparzo.
What was it like being in a Spielberg film?
In a Spielberg?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It was an honor. I guess for actors, it's the pinnacle. I mean, you wait your whole life to work with someone like Steven Spielberg, and that's the truth.
Definitely a dream come true. A learning experience, educational. Not only on the set, but off the set. Steven and both Tom and Steven are incredible family men. They taught us a lot about how to,
deal with.
I was going to say, in the industry, and also on set, but also just in life and in the industry, how to handle yourself and just how to present yourself, because they're just such incredibly giving and gracious people that it's really difficult to come away without learning something from them or taking something good away from these men. They're really good, solid eggs, good people.
What did you guys know about D-Day before this movie, and now that you've done it, what do you think about those events?
Not as much as after we did it.
Yeah, just high school, college, the movies and books that we had read. And
it was a test. I mean, it was like, it was a homework assignment.
Yeah.
And once we went out there, and once we spent time in boot camp, and once we learned how important it was to Captain Dale Dye, that was when we started to get this huge appreciation for the whole. And we believe everything about it. I mean, we believe the harsh reality of it. Before going, we were given reading material. We were told to watch certain films. We on our own wanted to acclimate ourselves to the war, so we knew as much as possible so we would be current to the time. But nothing prepared us to actually being there and actually going through the process and actually having Dale Dye drill into our heads the importance and the seriousness of what D-Day was all about, and how grateful we should be that we were successful.
Definitely boot camp was the springboard for the film. I mean, it was a springboard to realization of, how intense and how serious this, not only the mission of the movie, but the subject matter was. The boot camp was excruciatingly painful and intense, and Captain Dale Dye pushed us to the pinnacle of our mental and physical capabilities, and then asked us to go further. He was a very rugged and hardcore man, very, very difficult to understand and get to know at times, but has this innate wisdom and sensitivity that comes out when you most need it and least expect it. We've really grown to love him, and he's a very, very special man and unique. But also, I believe, presented the soul of this movie for us to carry through the 3 months of filming.
We it's very funny because we always end up talking about Captain Dale Dye, and there's a reason. It is because he created the soul of the picture. Even while we were filming, we would be worried. You had your directors, you had everybody around, and we'd sometimes be worried about whether or not Dale Dye thought we were holding our rifles correctly. I mean, we did not want to disrespect what a soldier would do, or the truth of the soldier. Mm-hmm. It was, and this is what we talk about. A lot of films, you go in and you use all different kinds of methods to finding your character and becoming your character. This was less about doing any kind of acting process. The way this was set up was for us to become soldiers, for us to become a part of this time, and for us to earn a respect for these soldiers. One of the things that Captain Dye said on the last day of boot camp, we were crying. He said, "I have these strings on my left wrist that I wear, and they represent soldiers that died under my supervision. What you guys have given me is something that fills that emptiness that I have. You guys offer me a chance to give something back, because you will be the voices of these soldiers that have died. And I will not allow you to disrespect all the soldiers that have died in World War II. With that as your motivation, with that as your spirit, we all went into the production wanting to be soldiers of respect."
Yeah.
So that carried throughout the whole film.
There was times where you'd be just absolutely exhausted and broken and bloody at times, and maybe some of the fellas had bronchitis and swollen ankles, and he would say, "Son, you feel that sensation that you're feeling right now? Don't ever forget it. I want you to remember that throughout this entire filming process and bring that to your character, because I won't allow you to disrespect these men and not bring honor to this fraternity of men that have died for your freedom." And not only was the boot camp like this immaculate time capsule of World War II. I mean, there was no modern amenities, no comforts of the outside world, and no civilians were allowed in either. Stephen wasn't allowed, nobody, no costume designers, nobody, nothing. And so we were really allowed to escape. We weren't allowed to talk about anything outside of that world. We weren't allowed to use our own names other than our character names. There was times where we would be fighting with bayonets in the mud. I mean, things were really hairy and so close to danger that a lot of people wept. I mean, there was times where it was very, very difficult. Once we completed that, the movie just became an extension of the boot camp, because you'd be walking down the rubbled and destroyed streets of this French village like Ramel or Vierville, and you'd stoop down and you'd see a French postcard from 1944. Like actual postcard from 44. It was impossible to not be in character, because everywhere you looked, I mean, your clothes, your fatigue stunk, of dirt and blood and mud, and your helmet was heavy and horse flies, and it was hot, or else it was pissing down rain on your head. And a soldier doesn't stand if he can sit, and he doesn't sit if he can lie down, and he doesn't lie down unless he's going to go to sleep. So that's where we were, in the rubble, in the mud, in the sand. We didn't go back to our trailers and get changed and have a shower. And
right. It didn't stop. And
it didn't stop.
The first, I mean, even when you watch the film, the thing that first introduces you to this whole story is the D-Day sequence, is the storming of the beach. And that's what we did first in Ireland. And while we were shooting that scene, and that took weeks, there were real live explosions. You couldn't really hear. Your hearing was impaired because of these explosions. Yeah. Live rounds were getting shot constantly. And so much activity was going on that you didn't even know that there was a camera there. It didn't even matter. You were concerned, am I going to run over one of these live explosions?
Or one of the other actors.
Or one of the other actors. Or is what I thought a dummy not a dummy, and a person, am I going to kick him in the face as I'm running, trying to really, handle it? It was so chaotic that you weren't there on the real D-Day, but there was a certain anxiety level that existed even in shooting.
I remember a scene where either a stuntman or an Irish Army extra went flying over my head. An actual man, I was running up the beach. I had no idea. I guess I hadn't quite paid attention to the design or layout of the mortars, and I guess I didn't realize, or else I knew where the mortar was, but I didn't realize that there was going to be a man being projected over my head, just and screaming like, and you're running along, diving into the sand as somebody's like flying over your head, and you look over there and there's a kid searching for his arm, and somebody else's prosthetic intestines are pouring out of their stomach. It was just like, you couldn't eat at lunch. You could, you didn't want your
Can you talk about how you both, because Stephen has a way of tapping individuals for his movies, how you both auditioned for it, how you got it, or can you start?
You're 100% right. This is where his magic starts. I mean, he uses an intuitive process. For me, I was really lucky. I spent about 4 years ago, I did a film called Multifacial, which is a short film. Spent all my $3,000, ruined my credit, and put everything on the line to make this film. And I ended up going to Cannes with the film. Denise Chamian, the casting director, had sent him this film, the 20-minute film. He watched the film and said, this guy has to be in my movie. He sent the film to Frank Darabont and said, create a new role for him. Put him in this movie. Had me meet him on the set of Amistad, pulled me aside, and for 30 minutes made me feel appreciated, valuable, made me feel, explained my whole film to me like no one else has, and immediately started talking about all kinds of deep subjects that we don't, like I wouldn't talk to anybody about. He had a way of getting to that place. And next thing you know, I was in Ireland for 3 months with the best time of my life.
That tells you how dedicated actors are to working with Steven Spielberg. He didn't even know what his character was. Hadn't even gotten a script, and he's on the plane. That's pretty cool.
When you say the best time of your life, can you elaborate on that?
I couldn't have had a better time. I've been acting since I was 7 years old. I'm 30 now. All my life I wanted to work with Steven Spielberg. He is the pinnacle of directors. I not only worked with him, but he took me under his wing as a New York director. I like my feature film was $47,000. He took me under his wing and treated me like a protege, and believe it or not, gave me a camera to operate, my own camera with my own camera crew, to actually decide and do these handheld shots. It was unbelievable. Everyone in the cast was looking at me like, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this. I literally called up at home, like when I got back to the hotel, please, what, Vin, slow down, I can't hear you. It was that sick. I was so ecstatic. I mean, and like Barry said, Tom Hanks as a mentor, both in and outside of this film business. I mean, Joel Schumacher said this great thing about Tom Hanks. He says, Tom Hanks makes this business a better business.
It's true.
Barry, can you answer Barry's question?
Yeah, I was sent the script and I immediately fell in love with the role of Jackson, and I went in and I read Denise Chamian, the casting director, and I did one short monologue from Jackson's dialogue, and she's actually it's funny, when I first went in there, she said, here's some sides that you're supposed to read from an entirely different movie that had nothing to do with Saving Private Ryan. And I said, oh, I never got that. I just, I saw Jackson, and I fell in love with it, so I memorized that monologue, and I really love that piece. So how about I just read this for you, and if you like it, great, and if Steven likes it, then I'll come back and I'll read with him. But if you don't, then we haven't wasted any time here, right? And or I said also, if you really like it, I'll come back and I'll read the other piece that you have. And she said, great, let's just read it and have some fun. And she was really cool and casual. So I read it, and she said, you know what, I think some things are meant to be. I think it's meant to be that you just happen to come in with that piece prepared, and that's great. And so next thing you know, I get the phone call that Steven wants to meet me on the deck of Amistad. So I also went out to Van Nuys Airport where he was filming Amistad, and we had the very similar conversation as Vinny and him did. It was incredibly personal. I met, actually when I first got there, I was looking up at the deck of this huge, massive Spanish slave galleon on a gimbal setup that they had to recreate the wave motion. And I'm watching Djimon Hounsou do this incredibly powerful scene where he's pulling the sword out of the Spanish slaver, and the silver streaking rain is coming down over top of him, and he's just ripped, and he pulls the sword out and just, he stands up. And I'm watching this as Steven is directing him, and just feeling like a little kid again, and just all my dreams are coming true. And then he stops production and asks for Barry Pepper to come up on set, up on deck. And so then we just chatted, and it was very similar.
He has a way.
Yeah, he has this way of just making you feel special and important. And I met his father, and I met Djimon, and we just chatted, and what it blew my mind was that he had the energy of like a teenager or a child. I mean, he had just come off of Lost World, and it was just about to wrap up Amistad, and he was already excited and gung-ho to do Private Ryan. So I just felt, man.
You could see it in the picture.
As soon as he said, do you realize you have to go to boot camp? I was like, I'm there. If you've got the energy to do 3 films back to back, I'm going to boot camp.
We went.
Yeah. Next thing you know, we were on a plane. Yeah.
What about, working with some of the other younger talent actors out there that are, already at that level where they have the girls screaming at them?
No one had girls screaming at them.
Yeah.
Matt Damon wasn't there yet. This is pre-Good Will Hunting.
Yeah. This was when Matt Damon was 16-year-old teen singing sensation Matt Damon, instead of sexy hunk bad boy Matt Damon.
Roughneck Matt Damon.
Matt came actually in the last month.
He did. He not only didn't go to boot camp, he came at the last month of shooting.
But that was Steven's little. I think that was Steven's.
We shouldn't have been. Yeah, we should. We didn't need to be familiar with him.
Yeah.
He was the new guy. He was the guy that we were looking for. It's better that he didn't come because it created our bond.
But the
was
bond,
so strong.
But the bond between us, once he got there, was immediate. We all hit it off. So
yeah, is it because
there wasn't. You know what was great about this film is actually I had commented on that. I thought it was part to do with boot camp, but Matt never went to boot camp, so I don't know if it applies. But he has experienced boot camp in the past. But man, the brotherhood and the bond that was created between us, there was. Was the potential of having a lot of egos, a lot of young egos clashing and bucking for position and dialogue and da-da-da.
But you can't have
But it didn't happen.
Tom Hanks and Steven
It didn't
Spielberg.
happen. They set the precedent.
Yeah.
And I think that is
Starts
it more
with
than
them.
boot camp. It was boot camp as well as Tom and Steven setting.
Tom's the guy that took us through boot camp. I mean, we wanted to quit. It was Tom Hanks that made us stay.
He wanted to quit too, but he was like, "We can't do this. We can't.
He's
we
like,
can't
listen,
walk out
10
on
to
this."
20 years from now, guys. I mean, we literally got up, we voted. We said, okay, let's vote. We're not going to be here anymore. We're actors. We don't need to kill ourselves. We're going to catch pneumonia. Let's get out of here. He said, we'll take a vote. He says, throw down a 1 if you
We
want
had
to
no
leave.
idea what he wanted to do.
No-
At this
no
point, he
idea.
just said, it's
take a vote.
We all stick together. Whatever
Throw down a
happens,
1.
we all go together.
We leave. Throw down a 2, we stay. We're shaking like a Vegas crap table. Bam! Everyone throws down 1s. His comes like
30 years later.
seems like 500 years later, but it's only 2 seconds later. Like a mallet. Boom! A 2 comes down. He wants to stay. Now we all feel emasculated.
Oh, totally.
We're like,
all
oh
like,
my god.
I didn't know you wanted to stay. I thought you said, okay, revote. All right,
no,
who's going to stay?
and then
Are we
we're
going?
like, okay. And he says, hey, guys, he says, listen, I know you want to leave. I know it's cold.
It's
know
like, I
you're
want to leave
tired.
too. This
I know you're
sucks.
hungry. 10 to 20 years from now, you'll look back on this and you'll be happy you didn't quit. And he's right.
Yeah.
Because it was the best.
It made all the
most
difference for the
rewarding
film.
time of our lives.
Yeah.
He's a 2-time Academy Award winner.
Bingo.
Yeah.
One quick question. Did they
Yes,
make you guys in real boot camp to make you take your hair off? Did they cut your hair off? In boot
Yeah, we had really short. Well, actually, Vinny's was the same. Mine was like yours, very, very short. But I just sort of let it grow out for the next film I'm doing.
Which is?
Green Mile with Tom. Yeah. The Frank Darabont, Stephen King. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks.
So we're back from Barry Pepper and Vin Diesel. A little postscript on Barry Pepper. As much as I said bad things about Battlefield Earth, I do have a really cool movie recommendation from Barry Pepper.
The Green Mile?
Yes.
Great
Which
movie.
I guess you're going to talk about a little bit.
I am not, but I
Yeah.
remember him in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that he alludes to this was such a really important time for Barry Pepper's career because Tom Hanks played an important role with Saving Private Ryan and The Green Mile, and
Right.
yeah, I mean, I honestly thought that he would be an A-list level big time star, but he actually ended up being a really solid character actor for really cool Barry Pepper films. I have not seen the Maze Runner films. He's in the.
I have. I haven't seen the latest one, the last one.
Oh, the Death Cure.
I saw the first 2.
But he's done some really good work in this movie called Snitch, which I'm sure if you're a Dwayne Johnson fan, you've seen. He was excellent in True Grit from the Coen Brothers.
Oh yes.
Yeah, very very good. A movie of his that I particularly would want to talk about is, now obviously he was in 7 Pounds, the movie with Will Smith back in 2008. But
yeah, vague recollection of that
he's
one.
also great in this Kevin Spacey movie from 2010 called Casino Jack. He gives a very very colorful performance in that. So he's a very, very good actor. There's Flags of Our Fathers. He worked with Clint Eastwood. But my personal favorite is this movie called The 3 Burials of Melquiades Estrada.
It's Tommy Lee Jones?
Yes, and now I'm looking at IMDb now. It was called The 3 Burials of Melquiades Estrada, but now it's just called 3 Burials. And
because those words are easy to pronounce.
Yes. 3 Burials. Listeners, if you love Westerns, this to me, released in 2005 is a classic, and it features a great performance from Barry Pepper and Tommy Lee Jones. This is a classic that it should not be missed.
And Vin Diesel, of course, no one's ever heard from since.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, he's done a couple of big. What else has he done?
I don't know. I think he drives really fast, and wasn't he in a porno? Wasn't that the XXX?
Right, and he's furious all the time. Yeah, no. Vin Diesel is a mega star, and if you want, you're going to that point with.
He was the Iron Giant.
He was the succeeding year, the voice of the Iron Giant, and if you've seen Fast and the Furious franchise stuff, if you have seen the XXX stuff with Vin Diesel, if you're looking for
the Pitch Black stuff,
if you're looking for a little gem where Vin Diesel acts like Matt was saying with the short film.
Wait, he acts like Matt?
No, he does sometimes, but
Why would he do that?
multifacial when he's multifacial was a part in his career that's just a surprise because in the beginning. But another surprise for me was this movie called Find Me Guilty, directed by Sidney Lumet. It's a courtroom drama based on a true story. He's very good in that movie. So Find Me Guilty, 3 Burials are 2 films from Barry Pepper and Vin Diesel that I highly recommend. Postscript stuff from these 2 wonderful actors. Speaking of wonderful actors, we're also getting right now into a very big one.
Moving on. Yes. Next up, we have Adam Goldberg and Jeremy Davies. Just wanted to say a little bit about Jeremy Davies. He's probably best known for his role as Daniel Faraday on Lost. and also Dickie Bennett on Justified. But if
Such
you
great characters. I love both those characters.
if you've played the PlayStation 4 game God of War,
which you have, Matt?
I have. I've played it all the way to the end. Awesome game. I recommend it, which I don't need to because I'm sure everyone else has played it too. It was huge. You might be surprised to learn that Jeremy Davies did the voice of the Norse god Baldur. Baldur was the main villain, the guy you fight in the final battle. That, if you remember, the skinny, agile, bearded guy with tattoos all over his body, not too fond of his mother. I won't spoil anything, but if you've played the game, which, again, is awesome, I think you'll know who I'm talking about. So, yeah, Daniel Faraday, Dickie Bennett, Corporal Upham from Saving Private Ryan, Baldur from God of War. Same actor. Go figure.
Iconic.
So that's what I have. You want to tell us about Adam Goldberg?
Yeah, Adam Goldberg, for me, just as a viewer, I loved him early on from the Richard Linklater film Dazed and Confused. To me, he was just the funniest part from Dazed and Confused. He always had the funny lines and just the scene-stealing work. And, you know, I thought, I mean, he was also in the 1995 film The Prophecy. I always thought he would have a bigger career by the time Saving Private Ryan rolled around 6 years later, but it's still late. He got the role in Saving Private Ryan. But the one thing that's really cool about this interview is, though it is a Saving Private Ryan interview, there's a ton of, which I guess I missed out on, there's a ton of coverage, ton of publicity for his directing feature released.
Scotch and Milk.
Scotch and Milk. That's all they do is say the word Scotch and Milk. And by the way, I still have not seen Scotch and Milk, directed and written by Adam Goldberg.
And he starred in it.
And he started it with another actor named Nicky Katt, who I also love.
And Giovanni Ribisi.
So that's, if you're a Scotch and Milk fan or want to know what the heck is Scotch and Milk, not just as a drink, but as a movie, take a listen to our interview with not Giovanni Ribisi, but who?
No, Adam Goldberg and Jeremy Davies.
And here we go.
Oh, no.
You guys sure you need all this stuff?
Yes.
All right.
Can you guys both introduce yourselves?
Adam Goldberg.
I am Jeremy Davies.
All right. And this radio, can you come right up?
Oh, yeah, come as close as you can to...
Yeah, I have no lungs, so I better like swallow.
The roles that you played both had a very important impact on the whole storyline. Let's start with you. Like I said, I want to kill you. You were just like, the reason you scared me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, so I wasn't listening. That's okay.
That's okay. It's a term of endearment.
What brought you to this role?
What do you mean? How did I get cast? Well, I had the good fortune, first of all, working with Steven's talented and beautiful wife, Kate Capshaw, in a film that maybe 5 people saw, including Steven, called The Locusts. For whatever reason, go figure, he liked my performance in that and cast me off of that. Just a gorgeous consequence of that. So that's how I came about getting the role. That's my story.
How did I get the role? I auditioned on videotape, and I think you'd seen me on the show Relativity that I was on, and I was interested because of that.
What knowledge did you guys have about D-Day prior to this movie, and what did you come away with?
My knowledge was limited, and probably just based on what conventionally you hear about it and what you conventionally see in the war films that have been made up until now. Furthermore, I was never a big war buff, and this really sort of, well, it certainly changed my perspective on this particular war, but also on kind of the military and on battle and that sort of thing in general, and really personalized it for me. So it was a pretty educational process,
At what point did you guys know that the violence was going to be this real, though? Was it just like a war movie in your head, like you've seen them in the past, or did you know right away?
Well, since we shot the D-Day sequence, very early on, it became very evident. I mean, we were right there on the beach, surrounded by huge pools of blood and dead bodies strewn everywhere, and hailstorms of bullets and explosions. So it became pretty clear, and Steven, I think, also, made it very clear. Nothing could have prepared me, not having shot it nor seen it being shot, for what the final product was, though. I mean, I was as stirred, if not more so, by watching it than I was actually sort of semi-living it,
How did Steven take you through? Can you walk us through how he took you through how you had to portray this guy, this technician?
Well, truthfully, he's really trusting with all the actors, and was very open to collaboration for this. So we didn't have an official rehearsal with him. Our boot camp served as our rehearsal and got us into out of our individual actor state and into a unit. So he never he hires people, and he feels like they bring with them what they need already, and so he doesn't over intellectualize what he thinks you should do, but he did, for whatever reason, with my character, add a lot of things, particularly in the third act. He just, as it was going along, he follows the progression of the characters as you're shooting, and he made some changes to mine, but he just it's very, very simple in terms of kind of character choices. He very carefully guides you he's not heavy-handed with that at all.
Have you guys seen the film yet?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Well, again, I was much more impressed and stirred than I even thought I would be. Considering I heard so much about, for instance, the battle sequences for so long, I felt, it's a difficult thing because, on one level you're watching this movie that you're a part of, and something that you filmed last summer, and you're sort of, you can't help but pay attention to your own performance and that sort of thing. And yet it was an interesting phenomenon that I think Jeremy and I both experienced, which is that it is so powerful and so affecting that at a certain point I almost was able to remove myself and become objective, and by then becoming objective I became extremely subjective, because this film really does, I think, put you in the driver's seat, and it was shell-shocking. It was much like being there, on the beach, as the beach rumbled, so did the seats,
Yeah. Can you talk about the boot camp experience?
It was the most pleasant experience I think either of us have ever had. No, I insist.
No, please.
No, you're Don Francisco's sister.
I was kidding. No, I'll just start this here, because I was actually
should I do the
advised
part of it, and then you can do that?
Please.
Okay. Well, so the boot camp experience was sleeping in pup tents for 3 hours on wet rock, and waking up and eating cat food out of tin cans, and then running 5 miles, occasionally dry heaving, and then being subjected to hours and hours of various technical exercises. But and then late at night we would talk about certain things, the psychology of war and that sort of thing. It was incredibly brutal and physically the most unpleasant experience I think any of us had ever had. But we also think it's probably the thing that really lends the authenticity to the film more than maybe anything else.
Yeah. I was actually advised that I didn't need to take part if I didn't want to, because my character is not supposed to be in combat. But I of course said no. I'll do it, and regretted it instantly. But certainly in retrospect, we all feel it was very necessary, because nobody wanted to look like actors in the film, well fed and perfectly rested, and the hair, perfectly tended to, etc., etc. I thought it was very, very necessary. It filled in a lot of details, even just down to how your boot feels after you've been wearing it for 5 days straight, and it was very, very necessary. I think that really added to the. It allowed us to respect the memory of what the veterans went through, so we didn't, it's one of the things that Captain Dye really insisted upon. He did not want us to appear on screen disrespecting them, by just something silly, some stupid actor, thing, looking too clean or something, so.
Did it make you curious and about wanting to talk to someone who was actually there on D-Day? I mean, and did you get that opportunity?
I never did, but I certainly, I was more than curious. I became kind of obsessed with it, for the duration of the shoot.
I didn't talk with anyone who was there personally, but I talked to my grandfather, whose brother was killed in World War II, and what was curious about talking with my grandfather about that is that how little information he had about his brother and what happened to him. He didn't even know how he was killed and exactly where, or when even, only finally got the message. So, but that was the closest I came to talking to someone. We mostly just read Stephen Ambrose's book, D-Day, which I think is a gorgeous book.
The interesting thing about your character was that everybody else came off the boats and ran on the beach and had to fight to get up there. All of a sudden, you just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was not supposed to be in combat whatsoever, and only because their translator was killed did I get in there. So obviously there's a certain amount of animosity I'm walking into already because these guys have been through the horror of the landing, and I have no idea. So I certainly represent what the audience sees, and that I'm seeing the combat as they are seeing it for the first time. So
you had to lug all that heavy office equipment, though,
yeah.
So we empathized.
Yeah, you should see my typewriter. It's crazy.
How tricky were the languages? That dialogue.
Actually, for whatever reason, it's not too bad for me. I was fairly familiar with French and German came sort of easy. I'm actually doing something right now where I have an Austrian dialect, and it certainly helped to have done this already. But
Adam, you talked about you discussed the psychology of war during the boot camp. I'm just curious about that. What did you learn about the psychology?
Just different sorts of reactions that you have when somebody, for instance, when a friend of yours gets killed. This is something we talked about for quite a while, actually. How one reacts according to Captain Dye's experience. Not how you'd expect, that your first reaction is an incongruous one, it seems. Oftentimes you laugh or feel, have this sort of manic feeling of glee because your first reaction is, thank God it wasn't me, and then the next reaction is, this incredibly deep-seated guilt for having felt that way, and it just sounded, it sounded emotionally, so tumultuous, on so many levels, and that was really important, just to hear those sorts of details, because, most of it seems what we and what actors tend to do is base their choices on the choices of other actors and other movies they've seen. Our frame of reference is limited when it comes to the horror of war. So Captain Dye really helped provide us with some insight. That's just an example, but
we learned that one of the most important things that I learned is that they say a veteran infantryman is a terrified infantryman, and that are we getting killed here? Are we all right? Okay. I think most of us have a lot of romantic notions of soldiers, particularly in World War II, because the films that have come out about World War II preceding this have been very, particularly about D-Day. You see 100 men sprinting up the beach, you see 2 men falling, when the ratio is actually the other way around. So to read all these accounts of men who, these strong men who fell apart as soon as they got into battle, made a lot of, particularly for me, who's not supposed to be in battle at all, that's like amplifies it for me about 100 times. So, war is not beautiful. It's not romantic. It's not simple. It's not heroic. And men are flawed. One of the things that I think provides potency to this film is that Stephen has found a balance in that he shows the Americans as flawed, but he also shows the Germans as not necessarily this evil empire, but human as well. So,
is there, as far as on the business side of this, is there like extra heat on your careers when you've been do you feel it like after you've been cast and you put Saving Private Ryan behind you, do other people take note already?
Yeah, it's kind of like I think if Steven had said to me, Jeremy, I want you to be a skinny guy stumbling around in 30 seconds of my film, I think that would affect my career. Even that, I'm working on the third film that I've since doing this, and this isn't even out yet. So, and I think I could safely say it has at least something to do with Steven.
I can't get arrested. Lighten up, guys. Come on. We're all having fun
We
here.
can't laugh. We don't want to talk on the
Oh,
sound.
I see. I got
Laugh on the sound bite.
you. You can go like this though. Yeah. No, I'm sure. Absolutely, it affects your.
No, he's
career.
doing fantastic, and he has a beautiful film.
I think that that's true. Thanks. He's. Yeah, no, you're right.
Can we talk about your tuna film?
Sure, yeah.
Scotch and milk. Scotch and milk. Scotch and milk. Scotch and milk.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you mine really quick. I did a film called The Florentine, which is a small independent. I did with Tom Sizemore, Chris Penn, Michael Madsen. Did a film called Ravenous with Robert Carlyle. It's about cannibalism. It's very strange, be warned. I was in Prague for 5 months doing that, and doing a film with Sean Penn and Kristen Scott Thomas right now called Up at the Villa. So, go figure, skinny guy like me. But he has a beautiful film that he's.
Yeah,
Scotch and milk. He's
a
really-
film
really-
that I directed that we just premiered at the LA Independent Film Festival. So I'm kind of spending a lot of my time trying to get that out there and seen.
Scotch and milk.
Exactly.
Scotch and milk.
Adam,
And
is it a
so
little
if you
surreal?
hear-
I was just gonna say, is it a little surreal that you're your own little, you're your own writer and director, and then you're.
I'm my own little writer and director.
Adam, I stopped. You saw it.
I
You saw it. I stopped. You like that one? Let's do it. Okay, go.
Scotch and milk. Scotch and
What I
milk.
was gonna say is it a surreal moment when you're actually, in Ireland or whatever, and Steven's, directing you, and this is what you want to be, and
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't want to be him. I don't make the kinds of movies that he makes. I think the most surreal moment is when he called me from the set after having watched a videotape copy of the film. That was pretty bizarre. Then it all sort of started to kind of come full circle. So yeah, that then suddenly I thought my life is an awfully strange one. But I thought it was strange for years. So I wasn't. I think it was.
Well, but maybe you do make different films. But did you learn anything from him that you'll take with you?
Well, no, because I think he serves as an inspiration, and it was I think what he represents is a passion and a dedication to film under very difficult and incredibly intense circumstances, and those are certainly the same sorts of circumstances under which I'll probably end up operating, albeit in a completely different context. And but it wasn't as if any of us were sort of taking notes on lens sizes and that sort of thing. We were very, I think, immersed in what it was we were doing as actors. So it was an overall impression,
Sorry.
Jeremy, do you do lens size?
Yes, I guess I got a few.
Calling him out like crazy.
Pass these around.
But you guys maybe will be judging future experiences based on this, you think?
Based on observing him.
Yeah, and just the whole experience of doing this particular film.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't believe I'm the skinny guy walking around in the film. I'm still coming to terms with it. But I was going to say, I actually did corner him a couple times myself for a little film school 101, just to, for what it's worth. And I remember him taking rocks and showing me how to shoot a dinner sequence, how like a dinner sequence is supposed to be the hardest thing in the world to shoot and not have it look like a billion other dinner sequences and
So
whatnot.
what was his tip?
He just showed me how not
Lots
to
of
shoot it and how to
Lumineers.
do it, but it's really indicative of this man's. He just has absolute love of the process of filmmaking. He's like, he has that emotional abandon that a child has, that we all kind of cut off at a certain point, and he's just he's mainline to it. It's really truly. I know I'm supposed to say this because I'm promoting the film and he's my boss and whatnot, but he's truly very. I'm very, very impressed with him. Just observing him on the set, because he's extraordinarily aware of everything that goes on, like in every department, every camera that's going on, the lighting system, what's going on at craft service, with everything with the actors. And he does it, and he just seems like this guy, It doesn't seem like, your idea of this genius would, it doesn't seem like how you would think he would be acting, but, seeing the film put together, it's just Anyways.
Now I'd like to sing a song.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You want to end with a song?
I don't know. Suddenly there's all these microphones. Really?
Give a shout out to
Imagination is funny. All right.
And
here we go.
You ever tried scotch and eggnog?
Ooh. Yikes. Have you?
Yes.
Have you really? You're hardcore, man.
At least I drank scotch and milk for a long time.
Thanks,
Did you really?
Oh, look.
Appreciate it.
Now you gotta sing a movie.
Seen it. Thank you.
Okay, we are back from those two wonderful actors and their honest opinion about boot camp, which was really cool.
Scotch and milk, scotch and milk, scotch and milk.
Scotch and milk, scotch and milk.
So we talked a little bit about Scotch and Milk actually before the interview. I did want to say it premiered at the Alamo Draft House in Austin, Texas, but I can find no evidence that it was ever released into theaters or on DVD. But hey, now that you've heard the title 30 times, maybe that'll change.
There should be some kind of groundswell.
Of course. So unless you've got anything more on these two?
No, but no groundswell needed for Matt Damon. And I distinctly remember Matt Damon at this moment. Do you, Matt Levitz? Of course you
At
do.
the junket or at his career?
At this point of his career when we were getting him at this junket. This was big time.
Yeah, he was. I think they even talk about this, maybe not on this interview, but the Spielberg one, that when he was cast, he was still an unknown, but then by the time this came out, Good Will Hunting had come out and he had kind of exploded. So he was an above the marquee name by the time people saw Saving Private Ryan. But that was very, very recent that it just happened. He was right at the very beginning of being a name that people knew.
Speaking of being a name, check this out. So Ryan, by the time before Ryan comes out, in the year 1997, he starred in The Rainmaker, directed by Francis Ford Coppola.
Right.
Okay, so that got some heat too, because it's considered a solid Coppola film.
Yeah.
But obviously, Good Will Hunting is a thing that broke everything, broke the floodgates for him and Ben Affleck with the Oscar win. And then following that is Saving Private Ryan. But can you imagine between 97 to 2000, Saving Private Ryan? He talks. We're gonna get to the postscript, but he's gonna talk about a couple of movies that are pretty big. But even his earliest stuff was 96 in Courage Under Fire, which he alludes to in the interview.
Right.
And I honestly, from 96, do you remember watching Courage Under Fire in 96?
Yeah.
The actual heat, I don't know, there was zero heat on Matt Damon from that performance. If you recall, there was acclaim regarding Meg Ryan in that performance as a lead, and also maybe some Oscar or awards talk for Lou Diamond Phillips, who plays kind of the antagonist in the film. He does a really good performance in that film, but it's so funny from 96, Courage Under Fire, Matt Damon, he's gaunt in that film, but he just, because of that performance, his career, everyone thinks it's Good Will Hunting that did it, but that's one of them. But Courage Under Fire, Steven Spielberg's checking out his performance in Courage Under Fire led to his pivotal role in Saving Private Ryan as well. So
right, playing Private Ryan.
Playing Private Ryan.
So why don't we get to it now?
We'll get to Matt Damon.
Oh, hey, how you doing? Good. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. All right, great to see you. All right.
How is that handsome young thing doing?
So how were you treated on the set? Because everybody, took time to say, well, this was before, Matt hit with Good Will Hunting.
Oh, yeah.
So he was just a guy, and he kind of came in at the end.
Yeah, no, it was actually kind of a testament to these guys, and especially megastars, moguls even like Steven and Tom. It's good to have seen them on the other side of it, because they were so accessible and so nice and so kind to me as just a guy with a hat in his hand and just showing up for work. And Steven was somebody who I would follow around and try to keep up with, and it was like going to the best film school in the world. Rather than listening to a professor tell me why he thinks Spielberg put the camera there, I could ask him, and some of those shots, the shot design of that movie is incredible. Some of those shots are just literally incredible, and I was right there to ask him how he did it and why he was doing it that way, and while the decisions were getting made and while I was watching him, design this incredible looking film. It was really, really, it was an incredible, it was an invaluable lesson.
So what kinds of things did you learn?
Yeah.
Well, boy, the biggest lesson I learned was and it's actually an important one, was a lesson in humility, just that I would never be him and that I could never be him. He makes, on average, I would say 6 decisions in a 10-second span at any given time. And he is so decisive. He's not wishy-washy. He never looks back. I mean, he makes, decisions about the camera, 2-foot adjustments, 2-inch adjustments, the speed at which it's going to move, where the line's going to happen. I need this stunt to happen over here. I need this explosion to go off, but I want this explosion to go off. Tom, take your line right before the explosion goes off, then the explosion. Matt, you're going to fall down into the foxhole. You're going to get your head down. The camera's going to come over your head. No, Janusz, 2 inches higher. Yeah, that's good. Camera's going to come over your head. Then you pop up. Fire 3 rounds off, but only 3 rounds. Go down. Camera's going to go down with you. You're going to reload. Then you pop up. Okay, let's go. And it's just like, boom, and the decision is made and it's done. And then you look at it on the monitor, you look at what he's done, and I mean, it would have taken me 4 years to come up with one of these shots, So it was just a lesson in I don't know, filmmaking that you will never be able to do. That'd be the name of the class. Filmmaking that you cannot do. It'd be like Michael Jordan taking you out to the local basketball hoop and dunking on you. Things that you'll never be able to do, son.
You're Private Ryan in this picture. This picture's all about you. How did you get the role?
Actually, Robin Williams played a part in it. We were in Boston rehearsing Good Will Hunting, and Stephen came up to shoot a day on Amistad. And Robin and Stephen are buddies, and they did Hook together. And so Robin went over to see him, and he dragged me along, and just brought me along, and I got to meet God. So I went up, and Stephen, I guess I found out later that he and Kate Capshaw had seen Courage Under Fire. And Stephen had said to her at that time, "That's the kid I want to play Private Ryan, except he's too skinny." And so I'd lost all that weight, and when he saw me, he made the connection, and 2 weeks later I got a phone call. So it was just serendipity.
Fast forward for just a minute. Has the impact of the Oscar hit you yet?
No, I don't think it ever will. I don't think it's tough to feel like you really deserve it, So I just no. No, I don't know that it ever really will. Sometimes it makes it really hard to have a bad day, because it was so surrealistic, the entire thing. It was, and to do it with Ben, it was pretty incredible.
What about as far as the other thing that has hit you, which every day the constant girls? Have you gotten a handle on that yet?
It's not actually. I don't get hassled really. I don't. I wear my ball cap and I go around and I haven't been. People say, it's generally people around our age, hey man, good job or whatever, whatever. Then that's not a hassle at all. That's, like a really lucky guy. You walk down the street and get a compliment, But no, I don't have that kind of insanity around me,
How do you stay centered with all this that's happening to you at the moment? With all the kind of films that you're doing?
Well, my family's not, they don't, pull any punches, and neither do my friends, and I think you can either buy into it or not, and they always said about, say, Michael Jackson and Bruce Springsteen in the mid-'80s when they were at the height of everything. They were the 2 biggest guys in the world, and Michael Jackson couldn't leave the house without, armed transport and all this stuff. Bruce Springsteen you'd bump into, at the laundromat, and I think it's what you make of it. It's what you want it to be. And I luckily haven't had the need for, handlers or anything like that. And I don't yet have the money for that. So it's a good thing. But to, I think people, when they see you kind of alone and just regular, it's not suddenly, you have to get through this guy to get to him. Oh my God, it's you, It's just kind of, you walk up and just say, hey, how you doing? Fine, how you doing? Good movie, all right. And that's it, and that's the end of the interaction, and it's nice,
Have you seen the finished product?
I did, yeah.
What was your reaction?
I was not surprised, but I was shocked. And so proud to be in it. I'm literally so proud to be in this movie. Eddie Burns and I were saying to each other, if they cut every single thing, if he cut every line we had, and there was just one frame that we were in, this would be the one we told our grandkids about, because it's an incredible movie, you know. And I can say that because I'm not in it that much, and I'm talking about Hanks and Spielberg, you know. I'm not talking about anything I did in it. I'm talking about the level of filmmaking and the level of performance from those guys. Yeah, it's pretty intense.
But looking at it after the fact, this weird thing has happened, and that is that your fame has grown to the point, way above where it was when you made the movie, that the audience recognizes you before the rest of your buddies in the movie.
Well, that's interesting because because, you know, originally you can actually see from the shot that's used to introduce the Ryan character, it's a really complex shot where Hanks is walking through with the men, and they hit the deck, they fire, the half track comes through, there's an explosion, they run around it, the camera, you know, is handheld following, all in one continuous shot. There's dialogue. He shoots the guys who are coming around the corner, and then 3 guys pop up and run over, and it's the first guy, and then James Ryan, boom, the camera moves away from me, goes to the third guy who says, you know, my name's Toynbee, whatever, and then it comes back to me, wait, James Francis Ryan? And then I say, yeah, how'd you know that? So that was the, you know, Spielberg's clear intention was that no one would know who I was, and it was going to be one of those haphazard things, like, this is how we found him, you know, it just kind of happened, you know, but that got undercut by me.
Along that line, we actually see 2 other Ryans before we see you. One dead guy laying on.
Sure, yeah, my brother, yeah.
Okay, and then we see the other gentleman who was not you.
Right, right, which would have been, you know, another reveal had, you know, people not known that I was in it. That would have been a reveal, which I think is a funny scene, and I think that young actor who I never met because he shot at a different time, I thought he was terrific in that scene where he just breaks down and he starts crying, and then he says his brothers are in grammar school, and then Hank says, well, I'm sure your brothers are fine. He goes, but how do you know? You know. I thought he did a great job, and so it would have been, but somebody said to me yesterday, yeah, when they came across that guy, I knew immediately that couldn't be Ryan. Because it wasn't you, so.
You've been recognized for your writing, but acting is so gratifying, I imagine. So how do you balance that now that it's a whole new game? Because where do you go?
Well, Ben and I were always actors, and we wrote to get work for ourselves. You know, we were hoping that Good Will Hunting, you know, would not only provide work, but then after it came out, would get us more acting jobs, and that happened, which is great. You know, the downside to it was logistically we're never in the same place, so it's tough to write. But we're going to try and write this fall while I'm working in Italy. I think he's going to come over for a while, and we're gonna try and write. And it's certainly something we want to keep doing. It's an embarrassment of riches though right now. So we're.
What are you doing in Italy?
A film called The Talented Mr. Ripley, with Anthony Minghella. It's really the script is great, you know. It's
what kind of part do you do?
He's a charming sociopath. It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
We're not going to get to talk to you for Rounders. You're not on the talent list for us. So could you tell us about your part in that?
Sure. Yeah, I think because I'm going to be in Italy, I'm not going to be able to be back for that. But I play a reformed poker player who's in law school, and he's forced to play cards again because his best friend, played by Edward Norton, gets him into debt, and so he and I are forced to play cards again to try and get the money back. But it's a great cast. It's got John Turturro, John Malkovich, Martin Landau, and Edward Norton. So it's a good one.
And Dogma?
And Dogma, I think I'll be back for that. It's next year, I think, but that's Kevin Smith's next movie, and it's got another ensemble. It's Ben's in it, and Linda Fiorentino, Alan Rickman, Chris Rock, and I'm sure I'm leaving people out because it's got such a great cast. But
is it a different thing though when you're working with Ben and with Kevin? You know, hanging with your buddies.
That's a totally different feeling. Yeah, I mean, compared to this is like, you know. I mean, the fear factor walking onto the set of Saving Private Ryan and not just saying, please, God, don't let me mess up. You know, it's the chance of a lifetime. This is a chance to, you know, be in the presence of these guys, and the production value is so high, and the cost of the shots is, you know, I guess compared to other blockbusters, it's not expensive at all, but, you know, compared to a Kevin Smith movie, it certainly is. And so, you know, all these shots revolve around dialogue. So I mean, there's all these incredible things happening and complicated camera moves, and everybody's got to be Johnny on the spot. And if this explosion happens and this stuntman goes flying and he's putting his body in harm's way, and it took him 45 minutes to rig the explosives. And let me tell you, you don't want to stutter your line when the camera gets to you. So it's a lot of pressure. It's a very different thing making a movie like this.
Do you think you'll judge this experience, or judge future experiences based on this? Is it that kind of memory?
Yeah, it's tough not to. It's tough to work with Steven Spielberg and not judge every single thing that happens after, and look back at everything that happened before and compare it to him. I mean, he's the master, and he commands that kind of respect, and I, every director I work with, every director I talk to, yeah, how's everything going? How was Spielberg to work with? So.
Now, what about the upside? One of the upsides of fame, I'm not talking about getting a good seat at a restaurant, but like maybe getting into a cool concert. Do you ever make a phone call if there's a great show going on or something like that?
I want to. I haven't yet, but I want to. I would love to go and get out more. But I've been literally working for basically like 2 straight years and haven't had a vacation. So I'm looking forward to in 15 months. I think I'm done with these next 2, and then I'm going to go to a concert or 2.
What's the overall game plan now that you can kind of write your own ticket? What do you?
Well, I'm doing The Talented Mr. Ripley and then All the Pretty Horses. Those are the ones I'm going to act in, and I think those are the 2 best scripts that I've seen in quite some time, with 2 of the best directors working today. So it's mine to blow at this point.
Ideally, down the road, writing, directing, acting. How do you see the balance?
Well, I'd love to. Obviously, for Ben and I to be able to, get another script done. But we don't want to do it unless it's good, And hopefully someday Ben and I will be able to direct something. It would, we'd want it. It would have to be there. We wouldn't just take a job, but we'd, maybe something we wrote that we felt like we could pull off for a modest price, and so there's not too much of a risk, because these days, you go out there and make one stinker, and that's it. They don't give you the keys to the kingdom twice. So we'll, we got to be pretty wary.
Tom Hanks was talking about how he picks a role, how he picked this particular role to do this. How do you? Do you have a lot of advisors, or do you just read the script?
Well, in the case of this, they offered me the job, so I went. But now, no, it's this, it's the same. The biggest change in my life is just access to a lot of the material, so I can just read it all and take my best guess at what I think is going to be good. It's a pretty personal choice. Hanks talked a lot about that, because he was telling us movies that he's done and movies that he's passed on, and good movies that he's passed on, but why he passed on them, and how he stands by passing on them, because certain actors did it, he says, better than he could have, and they because they had it in their soul to do it, and it's a gut thing. It's a gut feeling. And I think people get into trouble when they start going, well, I'm going to do this movie so that I'll do this action movie. I don't like it, but I'll do it because that'll build this audience, or that'll and when you start making choices for that reason, generally you start seeing people make subpar films. Like their level of work goes down, and nothing really gets out. So I kind of just figure, well, just do it. Just do the ones that I really believe in, and let the chips fall where they may, kind of, not worry about losing it, because to tell you the truth, I just assume that it's going to go anyway, and that it's, I have all my friends who, some haven't, who are struggling, and I was there a very short time ago, so I'm not going to sit here and worry about losing it. I'd rather just keep, know that I'm blessed that I get to work at all. Because it's there are a lot of actors. There's no shortage of actors in Hollywood, and good ones, and good ones who will work hard. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with your talent or your work ethic. It just has to do with where you are.
How about the tabloid factor? Is that kind of a pain?
That's a bit of a pain, But again, if I 2 years ago, if I heard myself complaining right now, I'd beat myself up. So I never want to complain, and sound like I don't, I'm not the luckiest man in the world, because I really am, So if that's the biggest downside to it, I'll take it, because the downsides on you know, in the other lifestyle, or, you know, like not making the rent, you know, that's a bit more of a consideration than, you know, worrying about, you know, the he said, she said stuff. So.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. All right, guys. Yeah.
And we're back with Matt Damon.
We're back from Matt Damon.
And we're back from Matt Damon. 1, 2, count off. So I'm just talking to myself. Now we're getting to Tom Hanks now, and is there really anything to be said about Tom Hanks, right?
Well, we already went over his career in our Apollo 13 episode, so I think we can just boil it down to Mazes and Monsters and move on.
Or the Man with One Red Shoe.
Sure.
I never saw that movie.
I'm pretty sure I did, but I can't remember anything about it.
But
I think he was wearing a red shoe.
But do you know what I do remember very well?
What?
I remember his performance in Saving Private Ryan. Such a seminal performance. I really want to hear what he has to say about playing this role.
Well, good news, Greg. We actually have an interview with him.
Oh, I'm going to press a button and we're going to play it right now.
Yes, you press your pretend button and then I'll edit it in later as if you did something. Cool.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Oh, you jaded bunch of. How are you?
Well, you know us.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. You jaded bunch of happy professionals. Great to see each and every one of you. This must be the radio room.
It is. You got it.
So, Tom, we understand that during the normal course of the production of a movie, there is occasionally levity on the set as everyone wakes around for the next setup.
I can't. It'd be all beeps if I told you what these jokes were.
Well, my question is, in a film as intense and powerful as this, does that go on?
Oh, Lord. I mean, you disregard the fact that it's an intense and powerful movie. Just understand you have 8 actors hanging around blowing time periodically. Gee, I wonder what they think they talk about. Kierkegaard, oddly enough, no. You know, the climate, the weather, maybe it's hot, but usually with some blanks in between. It's blank, 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 hot. And there's usually some jokes about various parts of the male and female anatomy that go down. But there's no shenanigans beyond that. It was, other than that, it was just showing up every day and going to work and trying to find a good place to take a snooze.
What brought you to this project, Tom?
Well, I simply read the script. Robert Rodat, who I think you get to talk to today. He and the original producer by the name of Mark Gordon, who you don't get to talk to today, had, I think, worked on this thing for quite a long time and developed, I think, like 17 different passes of the way the story was told, you know, different scenarios for the army and the invasion and what have you. The story was all the same, this concept of finding the remaining son of the Ryan family, that was always there. But everything else was in constant flux. And I think against Paramount's wishes, Mark Gordon finally just said, look, I don't care what other projects you have in development. I got to send this thing out. And they said, oh, don't, because we won't back it up. But they did. He did. And so I got it somehow through my team of crack show business experts and read it and instantaneously read it again and then called and said, look, this thing is great. What's the scoop? And my representative, Mrs. McGillicuddy, said, well, you never know who's read this thing as well, but Stephen. So I said, well, let's broker the phone call. Let's not. I don't want to call him up personally and say, hey pal, let's shoot. So we did it all professionally. We talked the next day, and probably within 24 hours, the two of us were making this movie. Now, that said, that began a process of probably changing every word and rethinking, you know, almost every page of what the script was. But that began with Mark and with Robert and Walter Parks and Stephen and myself sitting around a table and figuring out, well, okay, so now we're going to make the movie. What are the realities of how we're doing it? For example, in the script that I read, the Rangers were the Fifth Army Rangers who climbed up Point du Hoc, you know, that famous cliff. And that's just an element that obviously is not in the movie anymore for very specific reasons. So we started talking about that kind of stuff. And there it began.
So you mean they just couldn't call up and say, Spielberg, can you sign?
No, they called up Stephen and said, Hanks. And he said, no, that's what was really great about this. I think it would have been very different if Stephen had called me up and said, look, I've read this thing. Would you read it, take a look at it? What was really fantastic about it is what it sprang, like out of Jonah from the whale or something for both of us. It was, it wasn't something that had like a development spin to it. It was just stuff that we had individually parsed out.
What did you learn about the process of filmmaking from working with Spielberg? Because I read that one of the things that attracted you is that you wanted to see his method.
Well, listen. There's no actor in the planet who doesn't want to work with Steve. So that he could. Nothing is more or less attractive. It's like a constant speed of light. But Stephen works very, very on this movie. He worked very fast. Now, you hear you've seen all the famous making ofs and the storyboards and all this. They didn't exist on this thing. It would have been very precious, I think, if you had done those kind of things where, okay, here's the shot and here's the boot and here's the sand and here's the bullet and in the background the tank moves in. It would have been very precious and slow in order to make this movie. Steven shot this so fast, throwing down cameras and slapping lenses on them on sticks on a Western dolly on a crane, so that we were. I don't think we took more than an hour and a half to set up and get an entire shot. It moved very, 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 very fast. And all of us in who fancy ourselves, yeah, great, I have a DGA card, so I'm a director. But we just saw just how quick it went. We just looked at each other and said, we'll never be slow again if you can operate this fast. Stephen was very improvisational when it came down to how he shot this stuff. And he was only interested in one thing, whatever the actual truth was of that specific shot. So continuity didn't come into play in it. This some overall texture of what it is. He just had an idea and he followed it through until it was completely done, and then he went on to whatever the next idea was.
Did you feel as if you were? I'm sorry. Did you feel as if you were right in the middle of a war? I mean, the whole thing to me was so reminiscent of stories I've heard from my dad.
Well, I mean, we all knew that we were making a movie, so let's not pretend there's not a camera crew. But yeah, I mean, when we were shooting the Omaha Beach sequences, there was 400, 500 members of the Irish Army, and for those 3 minutes or so when we're actually shooting the scene, it's incredibly loud and it's incredibly chaotic, and you do have squibs, that are these mini explosions that are going on all around you, and you got to remember where they were, and there is no small amount of it's real water, and those things were made out of real steel, and if you fell down, your real weapon, conked you on your real head. So it was, and you're surrounded also by this kind of fake carnage that they assembled. Both. Some of them were mannequins, of course, but others were human beings. We had amputees that hired for the movie in order to portray certain things. So I mean, it's this odd kind of this banal terror is kind of all constantly surrounding you every day, and you really didn't get used to it in the course of the 3 weeks. I mean, every day you saw something or you recreated something that was really quite horrific. The actor, this is funny, the actor who we're in the landing craft at the beginning of the thing, and the actor who I throw over the side and we're dragging through the water. This was a guy who had been in drama school 3 weeks before somewhere in London, and he just went off on this anonymous audition, and he got the part, and he's never been in a movie before, and now here he is. He's out on this boat with Stephen telling him what to do, and I'm standing beside him, and he's scared to death of the water. He said, I don't swim very well, Tom. I don't. The poor guy was absolutely frightened, and so I said, well, welcome to the movies. It's pretty much what they're all like.
Do you think that the hyper-realism of this film may cause some negative backlash?
Well, if it does, I'm going to be perplexed by the motivations of the backlash. You want to complain about movies with hyper-violence. This isn't the one to do it. There's thousands, there's hundreds that come out every year. Your average James Bond movie has a ton more gratuitous violence than this film has. The only thing that this has in it is that we're recreating what really happened. I don't think any of this is glamorous. I don't think any of this is cool. I don't think any of this is built to the effect of, your average kind of action movie in which at the end the hero narrowly escapes a federal building that's been blown up by terrorists. And that always looks cool. So you kind of think, boy, wouldn't it be fun to blow up a building, or to be witness to the blowing up of a building. at the end of our film, I don't think you want to ever see anybody get killed again, no matter what their uniform is, or no matter what their stripe. I think what is so highfalutin or bodacious about what Steven has done here is that he took the grimmest part of the movie and he put it in the first half hour. If we had had time to get to know everybody and know who they are and the usual structure of a story like this, we would only have the horrific thing at the end where we would have felt some sort of emotional investment. But that would have been, I think, a sin committed against what happened at D-Day and really what we're trying to do with the film, which is put all of us in the position of what would we do if we were in the same circumstances. The odd thing is, the strange thing is, but the historical truth is that D-Day had to happen and Omaha Beach did happen, and therefore are we going to sugarcoat that? Are we going to downplay it? Are we going to make it more palpable to the audience so that they're not going to be offended, or that they're not going to be they're going to glean something else from the movie-going experience? I think that would just have been an absolute the antithesis of what would be right.
How about this film in relation to your image, though?
Huh?
How about this film in relation to your image?
I don't care. My image. What is my image? My image is not. It's who am I? I'm some guy in a movie. That's all my image is. So I'm not Robert Mitchum. I'm not. I'm just some guy in a movie. And if anything, I'm just. And it fits in perfectly. I'm just some guy on a boat who's trying to get across the beach. That's all.
Yeah, but you put on there's something you said. Acting is dress up anyway, but when you put on like fatigues and stuff, you look pretty good. Did you check it out in the mirror? Did you feel the part?
There's no option, We kind of showed up one day and they said, well, here's what they wore. And you put it all on. You said, oh, well, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Looks kind of odd. But that was, look, there's some movies where, you have 92 meetings with a costumer because you're really trying to shape out what the character is going to be. But the point here, you know what GI stands for?
Government issue.
Government issue. You have no choices. You have no options. Best is, okay, the only option I really had, well, should I wear my map case on the right side or should I wear my map case on the left side? Well, I'm right-handed, so I guess I'll be on the right side. That was it. I mean, I'm not discounting how fun it was.
I noticed it. Though.
It was. There you go. It is cool. I mean, we all dug the fact that we got to be, we might make this Army Man movie. That was no small, attraction to it. But
what about having some of the younger co-stars around you that are like the hot teen idols, if you will? I mean, what about that?
Well, they weren't then. Matt was just Matt. He was just Matt Damon. As soon as we began, after we have that kind of initial getting to know you moment, after that we were just this ensemble of guys, and the only thing that different was truly is I had a bigger trailer than all of them. In fact, some of them didn't even have You don't have a bathroom in your trailer? Oh, come on, we got to talk to somebody about this. That was really the only difference. We had lunch together, we spent as much time together as we could, and we ended up sort of adjusting to our parts a little bit. But once there, it was the grand. Again, we were all just guys dressed in green uniforms, and we felt glad that Eddie had to carry the BAR because it was the heaviest weapon, and we thought Tom got the lucky break because he had to carry the carbine because it weighs almost nothing, and I got to have the submachine gun that is the second most heavy weapon. So we talked about that kind of. At least you don't have to lug this thing around all day long. It was like that kind of stuff.
Your point about boot camp? Well taken. In that, when we saw the movie last night, we had just eaten, and the first 10 minutes of that movie, all we could see was blood and guts and intestines and everything like that. Also, you mentioned the fact that this is a historical fact. There are a lot of young people who have no knowledge about D-Day and what happened out there. But from where you're coming from, do you think you recommend a lot of younger people see this movie?
Well, I tell you, if there's younger people out there who daily watch, both in movies and television videos, this violent form of storytelling, so that even you can turn on cartoons at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on some stations and see superheroes shooting rockets at each other and solving their problems with their fists or explosions. If there's some kids that have just become so inured to that, this would be a very good thing. I think, for them to see. Because at the end of it, you know what? They're going to be confused and they're going to cry because they're going to see for real what happens when a bullet passes through the human body. It's not a very pleasant thing to see. There's other kids, without question, this movie is rated R. For a while there, they were worried it was going to be rated NC-17 because you know what? Omaha Beach was rated NC-17 for real. And so, I mean, look, I've got a couple of young kids, and they're not going to see the movie for quite some time because I just don't want them to be confused by the nature of the fact that their dad is in this movie that they know is fake, and I don't want them to come away with it I don't want to overload their little brains. But there's other kids out there that have just seen that had violence been pumped into them as a storytelling device ever since they first started taking in popular media. In which case there'd be nothing wrong with them seeing it at all.
Can you talk about the experience of boot camp?
Well, it was cold and it was wet and it was miserable and it was long, but it was absolutely necessary. I mean, I think it was 6 days or 5 days, and Captain Dale Dye, U.S. Marine Corps retired, who I'd worked with before on Forrest Gump, put us through paces that were, they were incredibly intense. There's no real way he's going to take a bunch of actors and turn them into soldiers, but there is a way he can take a bunch of actors who have really not had anything demanded of them and then demand of them to do things. Now, we probably got a couple hours of sleep every night, and it was very cold, and we were up, and we did throw up and things like that, and guys started getting sick. But we also learned tactics, and we learned history, and we learned that, even though you're tired, you can walk an extra couple of miles, and even though you want to go to sleep, you can stay up till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I tell you, by the time the first day rolled around, we were ready to go long before the camera crew was. And if we hadn't been through that training camp period, we would have been asking the costumers how to tie our leggings, and we would have asked the prop guys, well, where should I put this? And the weaponeers would have been telling us, things about the weapons that we already knew. So in fact, we were waiting for while the camera was setting up the very first shot of the day, we were doing what real soldiers do when they don't have anything expected of them. We laid down in the grass and went to sleep because we were still so tired from the boot camp.
Have you seen the special effects and the sound that was added?
Well, yeah, the computerized general special effects really isn't much. This is not a special effects heavy movie. For example, I can tell you that when the planes flew over us, you know how they did that? They got these planes and they flew over us. It's very loud, very big. The ships in the harbor and like the tracers and things like that. There's a number of things that have been augmented, but by and large, this isn't a special effects extravaganza. The sound, however, is a very specific thing. I know that Stephen previewed every single explosion, every single rock, every single rifle burst, everything. And I think that's actually the more impressive feat of what they've done here, because the sound of this combat, particularly towards the end when they're defending the town and you hear the enemy like way off on the periphery of the village. I mean, that's this kind of aural, A-U-R-A-L. Is that how you pronounce it? Aural. Well, oral is different. I don't know. I can pronounce it. A-U-R-A-L. That's that kind of thing that actually probably creates more fear and horror in my mind than was the actual sight.
During the research, did you have a chance to actually speak with anybody who was actually there at the landing?
No. I did a vast amount of reading. I was lucky that I had 6 months or so in order to prepare, actually more than that. So I just began to read. I just began to take in as much information as I could. There's a lot of documentaries you can look, and there's a lot of bad World War II movies. Steve and I looked at a lot of where he was getting a lot of prints for World War II movies, and some are great and some are stupid, But between works like Studs Terkel's The Good War and easily almost a dozen books by Stephen Ambrose. There's a lot of stuff that you can read in order to understand the particulars. The hardest thing actually really to put in, to grab the concept of was really what life for the general life was like in 1944. I mean, as of June 5th, no one knew what the outcome of World War II was going to be, and this idea of half the world enslaved by, tyrannous dictators in which information can't be passed faster than Morse code over a copper wire. That's a hard thing really to put your mind into it.
What's next for you, Tom?
Pardon me?
What's next for you?
Oh, I have a movie that I made with Nora Ephron that'll be out in December, and we'll all have the joyous opportunity to talk about that again sometime soon.
Is it true that I read that you're dieting because you're going to play emaciated?
Oh, that's a long way away. The front page of Variety is some really premature news sometimes.
What was the most important scene for you in this movie?
Well, that's, I have to tell you, probably the very first one. Because, in all honesty, that communicates a lot. And part of this is like, well, you'll never get this for a million years. But essentially what you're seeing is a man who's very scared. And why is he scared? Well, there's a number of reasons. Number one, he's a veteran. And he served in the Kasserine Pass in Italy, so he's seen men be killed. He's seen officers make mistakes and get guys killed. And he's had to kill before, and he doesn't really want to do it again.
Last question.
Okay. And another reason is because he's looking at something that wasn't supposed to be there. The reality was at Omaha Beach, the B-17s were supposed to have decimated the German defenses. But because they were heavy 4-engine bombers, they could only drop their bombs from a very high altitude, and it was cloudy, and they missed. They killed a bunch of cows, about 20 kilometers inland. The other beaches enjoyed the bombardment from lighter 2-engine planes that had come in much lower and were much accurate. So these soldiers who were going ashore in the first and second waves were told, listen, these landmarks aren't going to be there when you guys get there, so don't pay any attention. And of course they were all there. Other than by the naval bombardment, they'd been untouched. The other thing too is he is on the second wave, and that's one of the things in the screenplay that we talked about. The first wave, the ramps go down, and all in front of them is the obstacles but essentially the open beach. The second wave, the ramps go down, and they look onto hell itself. There's already thousands of dead bodies. They're looking at carnage, and they're having to step over literally blood and guts in order to possibly get killed themselves. That first scene for me when I was in the back of the landing craft, and we hadn't shot any combat yet, and all I saw was 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of guys just get blown to bits. And even though I knew it was pyrotechnics, and even though I knew it was all fake, and there were stunt guys up there, and a couple of them were rigged with squibs, still from my eyes, when we were done with that shot, I went up and found the rest of the cast and said, "Boys, you better hold on to your hats here, because you're not going to believe what we just did down there." And that was the way it all was. So really, in all honesty, the fear that is in Captain Miller's eyes at that very first moment is that's the whole movie takes off from there.
So what purpose does war serve then?
In this case, it serves to free. How about freeing a continent from Nazi hordes? In that case, that's what that serves. In other cases, it serves other things that aren't quite as clear-cut and delineated, which is a shame, but part of the human condition. Hey, that was the last question. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed this Tom Hanks interview because it has that really humble brag quote. No. You know what? It's just a humble quote. Where they're talking about his stardom and his superstardom and Saving Private Ryan. He goes, "I'm just some guy in a movie. I'm just some guy in a movie." It's just Tom Hanks.
He was a guy in a movie.
I guess in the context of Saving Private Ryan, but they don't come bigger than Tom Hanks, don't you? Do you agree?
I do, and I'm so glad he wasn't in a Star Trek movie. But that's another story. So the Nora Ephron movie that he brought up, he didn't want to talk about, was You've Got Mail, which came out later that same year. If you remember, he said, "I'll talk to you about that one when we do that junket." And then shortly after that, I asked him about dieting and emaciating himself.
Great question, by the way.
Which was in preparation for the movie Castaway, which came out 2 years later. And again, he wasn't ready to talk about it. So, that was fine for You've Got Mail. He was right. We did do the junket several months later, and we did get to talk to him again. But Castaway was a Warner Brothers film, and they didn't do very many radio tables in those days. And they didn't do any interviews for that movie, only television. So it would have been nice if he hadn't deflected that question. If he had talked just a little bit about Castaway while we had him there, we could have saved that soundbite and used it when the movie came out. But since he didn't, we weren't able to promote Castaway when it was released 2 years later. That's just how it worked. If we didn't have the sound bites, we couldn't talk about the movie on our shows. So I think he should have answered our questions.
Take that, Mr. Hanks.
Yeah.
We don't like that thing you do anymore.
That thing you do anymore. I think that's the prequel.
Okay, so Matt, anything to say before we sign off? Can I show you a really bad...
Well, we're not signing off because we still have Steven Spielberg to go.
Oh, you're right. Did he direct this movie? Can I tell you?
No, we wanted to throw him in because we like Steven Spielberg.
But before we get to Steven Spielberg, I'll do this. I'm not going to do this as a postscript. I'm going to say something really embarrassing about Saving Private Ryan.
Uh-oh.
I just made an embarrassing mistake regarding Steven Spielberg. The reason why I did that, Steven's embarrassing mistake, is I want to talk about embarrassing mistakes. Here's the thing. I used to work for this company called Westwood One Radio Syndicate.
I remember that.
And we would fax out every night we'd do a daily fax. So I'd fax out for the Oscar shows. I'd fax out the soundbite. I'd fax out the script. My engineer would send out the clips on the sound clips on the bird as they say it. But I wanted to wrap things up a little bit early regarding Steven Spielberg and Saving Private Ryan. The Oscar show, we had all the clips. Most of the backstage stuff, I was already assuming that Saving Private Ryan won for Best Picture Oscar.
Right, you hadn't realized that Harvey Weinstein had hijacked the whole thing for
Shakespeare in Love.
Shakespeare in Love.
And I sent out my nighttime fax saying Saving Private Ryan had won the Best Picture Oscar. That's in my professional career, hence the Spielberg faux pas. Earlier in the segment, that was my biggest, most embarrassing moment during my tenure at Westwood One. It was immediately corrected, of course, but that was my bad.
So maybe you shouldn't have hit send quite so early.
I'm not gonna hit stop right so early anymore too. But I should not have hit send so early. But that is my Steven Spielberg recollection. We like you were saying, we've covered Steven Spielberg stuff before in Men in Black.
Yeah, he was in the first episode, Men in Black. So yeah, we have already kind of gone over his career. And, just like Tom Hanks, he's kind of a guy who needs no introduction. I will say that he didn't usually participate in junkets for his films. So it was kind of a rare treat for us to get the opportunity to sit down with him. But I don't think any more than that needs to be said, other than I want to point out that the very first question is asked by our New York colleague, Paul Wonder, who is no longer with us. We lost Paul in 2000 at the age of 58. If you lived in New York during that time, you probably knew Paul Wonder from his weekly radio show on 99.5 FM, WBAI, where he worked for over 25 years. Greg, I'm sure you remember as well. He was a good guy. He knew his stuff.
Yeah, great. As you can tell from the interviews, a very distinct voice, and he, like Matt said, he knew his stuff, and just engaging with him as a fellow. Well, I don't even want to say junketeer because he was a radio journalist. He was actually friendly to us. To me, definitely. I was just, even though I was 6 or 7 years in, compared to Paul Wonder, I was on the come up. So it was nice to actually talk to vets like Paul Wonder during the New York trips. Really good guy. Really good.
Yeah,
guy.
And sometimes he would get on a plane and come to LA. We'd see him at the LA tables too. He's definitely a guy who loved to be quoted in movie ads. We saw his name in ads all the time.
Yes.
And I read in his obituary that they held his memorial in a screening room, which is perfect.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool.
Anyway, that's Paul Wonder. He's going to be the first voice that you hear. I am going to get up on my soapbox now and tell you about a pet peeve of mine, about something that some of the other junketeers used to do that would absolutely drive me crazy. And I had actually forgotten about this, but listening to this Steven Spielberg interview reminded me because it happens here. And that is, someone would ask a question with a little story preceding it that has nothing whatsoever to do with the question. I'm not talking about long questions in general, because sometimes what you're asking takes some explanation, and that's fine. But I'll give you an example to illustrate what I mean. Just imagine somebody asking this. I thought this film was really powerful. It really showed race relations in a way we've never seen before, and I think you're going to see some polarizing reactions from the audience. So my question to you is, what's your favorite movie theater, Candy? And you would see the talent gearing themselves up to talk about race relations, and then all of a sudden they'd get whiplash going, oh wait, you want to know about Candy? Okay, sure, we'll talk about Candy. And my frustration was always, they only gave us 18 minutes with Steven Spielberg, and he's a huge name that we rarely got. It's an amazing opportunity for us as movie fans, and we needed good sound bites for our shows and our outlets, and this person is going to waste 30 seconds of it pontificating? Just ask what's your favorite candy. Cut to the chase. You don't have to bond with them first. That's not why we're there, and it's unfair to everyone else to suck up all the time. So anyway, you're going to hear that. It happens in this interview. I'm not going to tell you who or where, but pay attention. It's there.
I was going to talk about another pet peeve, but maybe that'll be. I'll save that for another junket talk. You just reminded me of a huge pet peeve that we'll talk maybe in the postscript.
You know, we're old and we're cranky.
We're old and we're cranky, but you know who's not old and cranky?
Who?
Wait, that's a horrible segue. You know who seems to be young and passionate though? He's wizened and older than we are. It's Steven Spielberg.
Wow.
Steven Spielberg is
transitions from Greg.
Transitions from Greg, but more importantly, forget the transitions. Remember Steven Spielberg. Here we go.
Steven, you said, I believe, and I hope
Let
I'm
the
not
man
getting
sit down.
I got some tea and coffee or whatever. Okay.
I hope I'm not getting this
Go ahead.
wrong, that you said that the making of Schindler's List you considered the peak of your career, and were wondering if you could ever surpass that. Having made this film, I wonder how you feel about that statement.
Well, I had never said that Schindler's List was the peak of my career. I can't imagine saying that at any point, short of the next day I retire. It's the kind of thing that if I'm going to say that, well, the next day I really should go off and just pack it in. No, every film has a significance for me. There have been very few films that have lacked a significance, even films that appear frivolously entertaining. There was always a method to the madness of saying yes to that project. And at this time in my life right now, Saving Private Ryan is a very important film in my life. Would you talk about the significance of this film? Because this film, by the way, we had just got finished having a snack before this film, and we saw all this gore coming at us, which was real. That's because war is real. Can you talk about what this film meant for you? Well, I had seen every World War II movie ever made, just about, and especially the films made during the 1940s that were made principally as recruitment tools to get young Americans to enlist in the different branches of the armed services. And those films were about glory and sacrifice upon the altars of freedom, but they were glorified versions of what the veterans were not experiencing. The veterans were experiencing something wholly different than what the American public was allowed to look at. So in a sense, Saving Private Ryan is in reaction to the veterans saying they have not yet told the story from our point of view of what it was like to be first, second, third wave on Omaha Beach, or fighting to St. Lo or Keratin or through the hedgerows, and so a lot of what motivated me to tell the story the way I told it, to give audiences a physical experience, not a laid-back voyeuristic one, was because it was a way to acquit and honor the veterans who paid a pretty high price to let us sit around talking today.
Can you talk about the use of the handheld camera? I thought that was particularly effective.
Well, because, when you're running with 50 pounds on your back and an M1 or a BAR, and you're throwing yourself down, nothing's smooth. And war is a blur. War is a big maelstrom of chaos and smells and losing your hearing and hearing too much and seeing too much, and it all comes at you. These kids who hit Omaha Beach, 70% of them had never seen combat before. That was a choice that Eisenhower made. He did not want to take veterans from Africa and Sicily and yet again put them in harm's way because he knew that they would know what to expect and might not go through with it all the way. He wanted young kids who had never experienced combat, they were right out of basic training and right out of Portsmouth, England, to get into those Higgins boats and hit those beaches and occupy, and for the first time occupy France. And it was a shock to all of them. And I wanted to somehow find a way to tell their stories through their shaking points of view, and the handheld camera was a way to do that.
I have a follow-up to the earlier question. Was the source material simply a means to an end? Did you always have this movie in you?
Yeah, I think I always had the movie in me, but the source material was certainly, you can't find a more interesting invasion than the Normandy invasion. And it certainly broke the back of
of all the occupied countries, and ultimately brought us across the Rhine into Germany. So, and World War II, you look at my dad fought in World War II. He's 81 years old today, and he told me war stories as I was growing up. I learned more about the war from him. And he never told me it was fun. He never told me it was John Wayne. He always sort of told me the truth about it. And I thought, well, if I ever get the opportunity where I'm not using the war as entertainment, as I have with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Raiders of the Lost Ark, where World War II was just a backdrop, an excuse to have to go on an adventure. If I ever really do a serious story of the war, I want to involve some of the people who were there in informing me how to tell that story.
We've asked almost everybody who's come in here what their impressions were of working with you, and they've all been very complimentary. But as far as filmmaking process go, they've all remarked about the speed at which you work and the amount of decisions you make in a short period of time. Do you think you've developed? Is that just from rote repetition? Is it something that's innate in you?
No, I've always worked fast, and I'll tell you the reason why I work fast. If I work slowly, and I've made a few films like Jaws in 1941 that have Close Encounters of the Third Kind that took many, many, many months to shoot. And films like that, I tend to lose sight of the reason I said yes to the project and the themes I'm trying to convey to everybody and express to the audience. And I lose track of it because I'm just, I'm getting 4 shots today, and I have more time to read a novel than I do to direct a movie. When I work faster, I see the movie more clearly, and I have more objectivity about it, and I'm more lucid about why I'm telling that story, and I'm more informed about how to get new ideas and tell the story better. So I just tend, the faster I work, the better I work. The slower I work, the more, I think, intellectual I become because I've got too much time to think. And I think filmmaking is really an intuitive art form, less of a methodical one.
So how does storyboarding come into that?
Storyboarding, for me, was my net. It was a way to let everybody on the crew know my intentions ahead of time so they could be prepared for me and therefore allow me to work faster. Because the more prepared the crew is, the faster you can work. The less prepared they are, they have to go back to the truck to get another 100 effects out of the truck and bring them onto the set because you just came up with the idea at the moment. It takes a little longer than getting the idea a couple months ago and everybody has what you want. But I've only used my storyboards as a safety net. Even with a heavily storyboarded sequence like Jurassic Park, I'll still improvise inside the storyboards and make a lot of it up.
Did you use storyboard on this?
None. No storyboards at all on Ryan.
Wasn't that kind of scary?
Yeah, it was scary, but I also wanted to have a little bit of the combat experience of trying to survive and trying to figure out, as a filmmaker, what the GIs had to figure out about where to go once they get off the Higgins boats.
Do you think audiences do you think audiences will be prepared after seeing so much unrealistic war films, that they will be prepared for the graphic realism of your film and be able to accept it?
Yes, I think the audience will be prepared for the graphic realism because they'll read about it, they'll hear about it, their friends will talk about it, and then they'll make the informed decision whether to see the movie or not.
How come you didn't go to boot camp?
That's one of the reasons I'm doing the press junket. I really do press junkets. I want to inform the audience. It's the reason I'm talking openly now as opposed to after the film's in theaters, that this is a kind of film that I would not let a 14-year-old or under see. If there was a rating between NC-17 and R that restricted, young people, under 14 years old from seeing the picture, I would have accepted that.
What do you want us to come away with from this particular film? What do you see it as?
I just want people to see the movie, and then next time they pass a veteran cemetery, they don't look the other way, where it'll suddenly mean something to them when they look over at where the veterans are interned today, where that will have a little more meaning inside our own sort of, headlong reality as we race into the 21st century, trying to grab at life as it comes to us. People just don't like to look back. And if we can get people just once to say, oh, yeah, I know that from Private Ryan.
This studio bears your initial.
Yeah,
Can you,
one letter.
Can you remain simply the artist, or are you becoming more of the businessman at all?
Well, a businessman, is an ugly term if you're an artist to other artists who hate you if you're also a businessman. I hate myself if I think I'm too much of a businessman. I don't think of myself as a businessman, by the way, but I can't deny that I know how to do business within the film industry. At the same time, when I formed DreamWorks with Jeffrey Katzenberg and David Geffen, and I had a press conference when we announced the company, and what I stated then still holds true and has been proven true today, which is I am a director first. And I'm a filmmaker before anything else, and that's all I really care about. I mean, and the more movies I can direct for my company, and certainly the more things I produce, because I had Amblin for 13 years before DreamWorks, and we had a great time doing that. I like making movies. I mainly like directing movies, but if I don't direct them all, I enjoy developing them.
In the preparation of this movie, you got Captain Dye, and everyone talks about Captain Dye and what the experiences was at boot camp. Can you talk about getting him, and what was his role for this movie?
Captain Dye's role in the movie was to impart the realities of war on the cast and even on me. He served 4 tours of duty in Vietnam, and he knows what he's talking about. And he's also advised on other films. And it was very important that the actors know that this isn't an ordinary film. We're trying to recreate something that actually happened. We're not inventing anything. Yes, the center of our story is fiction, but the events that the fiction travels on are historically accurate. And Dale Dye sobered everybody up and made them in very few hours understand that we were going to truly recreate something that actually happened, and this wasn't something just to come do a couple days of work and blithely get back on the airplane. And I think Dale made us all take the war very seriously.
What's next for you, sir?
Well, I'm going to direct a movie called Memoirs of a Geisha from the Arthur Golden novel, and that's the next film I'll direct.
Can you talk a little bit about it?
It's a story of the geishas in the Gion district of Kyoto from 1929 to 1975. And it's a very compelling book, and I just love the book.
What compelled you about this book?
I don't know. There's nothing in my experience that would prepare me to want to tell a story like this, except I was a reader, and I read the book, and I just couldn't turn the pages fast enough. And I thought the story of Sayuri and just what she goes through and what she accomplishes in her life was a sort of a wonderful picture about self-reliance. Wonderful story about self-reliance.
What do you think are the qualities that make up a good director?
Telling a good story, knowing how to not only tell a good story, but knowing how to listen and hear a good story, and knowing, how to recognize one. And I think, look, you don't have to be a technically great director to be a great director. There's a lot of the greatest directors in Hollywood weren't technically that great, but they were great storytellers.
People who want to work with you, are they going to have to make a film first now?
Isn't that weird? It's so weird that four out of 8 squad members, 4 of them are directors. Tom Hanks, and then Eddie Burns, and then Adam Goldberg and Vin Diesel are all either professional directors or have made films in 16 millimeter or 35 and are trying to get jobs as directors. It's wild.
What about Matt? When Matt's profile took off, because initially when he was cast, I understand why you cast him, because we weren't supposed to know who Private Ryan was.
Right.
What did that do for you? Was it a little joke between the?
It wasn't a joke. I gave Matt a hard time. I said you weren't supposed to open the flower this early. So what the heck did you do here?
Well, you're known for tapping. I mean, they talk about how you tap people. Like you see a little thing here, and you'll say, you'll make a note to call him.
Mm-hmm.
Has there ever been one that you just missed, or you tapped them and it just didn't work out for you? Seems like you hit gold.
Yeah, I was very lucky with Matt Damon because I liked him in Courage Under Fire. I thought it was a wonderful performance. That third act scene he has with Denzel Washington was just a great scene, and I wanted him for that. When I was shooting Amistad in Boston, Robin Williams paid me a visit. He was ready to shoot Goodwill. He was ready to shoot Good Will Hunting there, and he brought Matt along, and Ben Affleck, and I took one look at Matt, and I said, "Oh my God, you're Private Ryan." And that's how it all started.
Last question.
How do you handle criticism? I mean, take Amistad, which I thought was the best film of the year, but there were a lot of critics who didn't agree with me. How do you personally handle? Does it roll off you?
Well, I've been directing professionally now since 1971, movies since '72 professionally, and so I'm a veteran now. I'm used to it. there's nothing you can do about it. So when there's nothing you can do about it, you have a choice. And the choice is to expose yourself to all the positive and all the negative and triumph and suffer just by reading everything and listening to everything you can get your hands on, or essentially, keep working and go on to the next project. And I've always tended in my career to always move on to the next film and not to dwell or be a Monday morning quarterback and snap my fingers and go, shucks, that film critic's right, I should have done it that way. I don't reflect that much yet. There'll come a point in my life when I do reflect. But right now I've been pretty busy.
Advice to young filmmakers?
Write. Be writers first, because it's easier to get a job as a director if they want your script. But the catch-22 of that is it's very, very hard to find an agent to show your script to people who might then hire you to direct your script. So it's a brutal catch-22, maybe the most brutal in the world, starting out being a writer. The other advice is go to film school, make a bunch of videos and 8mm videos and 16mm, film and it's a lot easier actually to get your short film seen than it is getting your script seen, because legally we're not allowed to look at scripts that aren't solicited, don't come through professional, well-known, literary or talent agencies. So many writers can't get their scripts to those agents who have the connections with the studios. So the next best thing sometimes is just go to film school and make some films and get noticed that way.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're back from Steven Spielberg. Matt, you have any good stuff regarding Steven?
Just a little bit. This was 1998, and at the time, as he talked about in the interview, Spielberg was getting ready to direct Memoirs of a Geisha. But that didn't wind up happening. The film was made later, and it was released in 2005, but the director was Rob Marshall. Spielberg is listed as producer. This is actually fairly common for Spielberg. He's always got at least half a dozen projects in development at a time, getting ready to direct, but he doesn't have enough time to make them all, so he prioritizes and projects fall by the wayside. There's another really well-known project that he was definitely going to direct at one time, but then he didn't, and that was the first Harry Potter movie. He spent 6 months prepping that film, and he even cast Haley Joel Osment from The Sixth Sense to star as Harry Potter. But then he walked away, and instead he made AI with Haley Joel Osment. Obviously, he was determined to work with that kid no matter what he did. But I found conflicting reasons for him departing Harry Potter. Some web pages say that he and the book's author, J.K. Rowling, had creative differences. Other sites that I found said that he just felt it would be too easy for him, not enough of a challenge. I don't know, maybe it was both. I mean, either way, the end result is that the experience of making it wasn't going to be enjoyable and he wasn't going to get anything out of it, so why do it? Anyway, speaking of experiences that are not enjoyable and nobody got anything out of them, Greg, why don't you tell us what movie our next episode is about?
Really? Wow. Our next episode will be a pretty iconic one. Waterworld. It was a memorable junket for me because once in a while I do ask questions, and I remember asking some pretty pointed questions to Mr. Costa.
I think it's interesting. We don't always want to focus on the successes. Sometimes the failures are even more interesting. Yeah. And this was a spectacular failure. And I think that gives it a really cool context to listen to these interviews and hear where they were when they're still selling it. They don't know yet that it's about to fail spectacularly. They think, well, maybe it'll do well. You don't know. So they're putting the best face on it. But there's an interesting story behind it and how much trouble the production was that they talk about. I think these are some really interesting interviews, and I hope that you guys will tune in, join us for that.
A little teaser, something that we haven't really been talking about the last several episodes is some junket talk. This episode will have some room for that, so there's going to be a little bit more personal anecdotes from me and Matt, or Matt and I, so there's going to be some good stuff. I have some...
Both me and you and me.
And us both.
All four of us.
Matt, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You wanted to close out the episode.
I did? Well, I just wanted to get out of here. I'm hungry.
Oh, you are hungry. Okay.
Yes, we have to end each show with our business. Our webpage, of course, is www.mattandgregpodcast.com. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/mattandgreg. We've also got a YouTube page, which you can find by running a search on the name of the show. And as we always say, please subscribe. Don't just listen to one episode. We put a lot of work into this. We've got some exciting stuff lined up for future episodes. So we want you to come back and join us and hear more of this stuff. So please subscribe.
Please subscribe, comment, tell us what you think of the show, give us your insights, etc., etc. We again, I say this every episode, we do this because not just for our love of cinema and remembering the times gone by of these junkets, but these junkets are actually, these interviews are very, very valuable, and they're very value added, but it's very important to have a dialogue from you guys to hear what you guys think about these films, these interviews, and less importantly, the show.
Yeah, let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, when I should get rid of Greg and get someone else.
That would be a yes. Thank you, listeners, for yes, and fellow Movie Buffs for listening to the program. And we look forward to you deep in the water for our next episode.
The world of water.
The world of agua.
See you then.
See you then.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled lives.